Thousands of years ago, the ancient Sumerian civilization carved into stone stories about gods who descended from the sky. They called them the Anunnaki. Most of us were taught that this was only polytheistic mythology. But in the year 1849 in Mosul, Iraq, every assumption completely collapsed. The British archaeologist Austen Henry Layard was excavating the ruins of the ancient city of Nineveh, the capital of the Assyrian Empire, one of the most powerful empires in the history of the Middle East. In a room buried deep beneath the ground, he found a terrifying treasure. More than 30,000 clay tablets engraved with cuneiform, the oldest writing system humanity had ever invented. All of them were historical, astronomical, and administrative records with astonishing detail, proving the real existence of the Anunnaki. But here is the shocking secret that mainstream scholars have always tried to avoid. What was written on those 30,000 clay tablets matches perfectly with the darkest chapters in the most widely read book on the planet. The Bible never denied the Anunnaki. It simply called them by another name. Were they the gods who brought civilization to Mesopotamia? Or were they the fallen, evil spirits who triggered the wrath of the Great Flood? Today we will step together into the forbidden room of history to uncover their true identity. Welcome to the erased chapter of history. The forgotten piece of history. Try rewinding time for a moment. Not just a few hundred years, but more than 5,000 years into the past. For most of our existence on Earth, our ancestors lived almost nameless lives. We were wandering shadows, hunting, gathering, and curling up inside dark caves. The highest human skill at that time went no further than chipping a stone until it became sharp, or taking turns keeping the fire from going out in the middle of a winter night. Everything moved slowly, extremely slowly. It took tens of thousands of years just to learn how to polish a tool smooth. But then something extremely strange happened. When we mention the first civilization of humanity, our minds often automatically jump to the pyramids of Egypt or the marble temples of Greece. But no, we are talking about a dusty stretch of land nestled between two giant lifelines, the Tigris River and the Euphrates River. The place the Greeks called Mesopotamia, the land between the rivers, now lies within the borders of Iraq. Textbooks often call this place the cradle of civilization, which sounds gentle enough. But the truth, this place was truly a nightmare of climate. The summers burned like fire, and the winters cut to the bone. The land itself was a mess. Some areas were fertile, while others were so salty that not a single blade of grass could grow. Then flash floods would arrive, without warning, wiping out everything in a single night. Droughts could stretch on like the end of the world. Surviving here was not for the weak. Surviving here meant you had to cooperate, had to create, and had to be stubborn enough to endure. And from the insane pressure of that environment, the slow timeline of humanity was suddenly broken. There was no gradual transition at all. It was as if someone had just pressed the fast-forward button on the history of evolution. Suddenly, from the middle of those barren plains, massive construction sites appeared. People no longer hid in caves or temporary huts. They raised enormous city walls out of mud brick. Tens of thousands of people began living together inside structures that had never existed on this planet before supercities. Try to imagine the real setting at that time. Uruk, one of the oldest supercities of the Sumerians. The markets were noisy, with the voices of merchants bargaining, trading wheat for fish and cloth. Across the alleyways, you could hear the sharp clang of bronze workers' hammers and the clattering of looms. And reigning at the center, rising above all of it, stood the ziggurats. These enormous stepped pyramid temples reached upward like artificial mountains, so majestic that you could see them from miles away. Those first inhabitants, the Sumerians, seemed as if they had just downloaded an enormous system of knowledge. And the scale of what they accomplished is truly enough to give us chills. Take mathematics, for example. The Sumerians used a base 60 counting system. That sounds strange compared with the base 10 system we use today, doesn't it? But in reality, it was a practical stroke of genius. The number 60 can be divided evenly by many other numbers, making the calculation of fractions and astronomical measurements unbelievably precise. Even more frightening is this 5,000 years later, you and I are still living according to the rhythm of Sumerian mathematics. Every minute has 60 seconds, every hour has 60 minutes, and a circle always has 360 degrees. Every time you look at a clock, you are using the mental ecosystem of an ancient priest. And it did not stop there. While people on other continents were still bending their backs under heavy loads, tying stones or sacks of wheat to their bodies, and struggling to drag them across the ground, a mechanical miracle appeared in Mesopotamia. Around the year 3500 before Christ, Sumerian carpenters did something never seen before. They joined solid pieces of wood together, carved them into a perfect circle, drilled a hole in the center, and attached it to a rotating axle. The first wheel in human history was born. The friction that had imprisoned human labor for tens of thousands of years was suddenly broken. Four-wheeled carts began rolling along the dirt roads of Uruk. With nothing more than a simple wooden circle, the Sumerians completely changed the scale of trade architecture and even war. They could move tons of grain using only the pulling strength of a donkey, causing trade networks across the Middle East to explode in scale. And when you have a super city gathering tens of thousands of strangers together, chaos is inevitable. Before the Sumerians, justice was simply the roar of the strongest person. Law was whatever a chieftain happened to shout in a fit of anger. But the Sumerians did not accept that savagery. Long before King Hammurabi of Babylon became famous for the principle of an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, Sumerian rulers had already written legal codes that were astonishingly clear and detailed. They specified exactly how many shekels of silver a carpenter should be paid for one day of work. They set clear penalties for theft, false testimony, and specific rules for land ownership. The idea that the law must be fixed, visible, and applied to everyone pulled humanity out of the age of brutal tribes. But wheels can break. Verdicts can be forgotten. Everything in this world will eventually be buried by desert dust. Unless there is the greatest turning point of the Sumerians. That turning point was writing. At first, it was not born for poetry, but from the pressure of accounting. The human mind could not remember thousands of daily transactions involving sheep, wheat, and beer. So the Sumerian priests took a wet clay tablet, used a sharpened reed, and pressed it down. At first, they were only rough marks, simple drawings representing an animal or a jar. But over a few generations, like a magic of thought, those impressions evolved into the extremely sophisticated cuneiform writing system. The ability to record sound and the most abstract ideas of the human mind was officially born. Do you realize the greatness of this moment? For the first time in the history of the planet, a voice no longer disappeared the moment it was spoken. For the first time, the memory of humanity defeated time and death. A person who had lain deep beneath the ground for 1,000 years could still speak directly to you through a hand-sized clay tablet. Later generations no longer had to repeat the mistakes of the generations before them. They no longer had to begin again from zero, but could stand firmly on the shoulders of those who came before. From dry accounting records, the Sumerians began using writing to compose hymns, write medical prescriptions, record the cycles of the moon, and create magnificent epics. The Sumerians did not only give us cities or the wheel, they gave us the immortality of knowledge. In the blink of an eye, in historical terms, humanity went from grunting around a fire to signing international trade contracts and imagining the workings of the universe. You see, the greatest arrogance of the modern world is that we always assume our ancestors were naive. When scholars today translate those lines carved into clay, they often smile and place them in a drawer labeled mythology. They assume that the phrase gods descending from the sky was only a literary metaphor, a way primitive people personified thunderstorms or solar eclipses. But stop and think for a moment. We are talking about people obsessed with precision. People who calculated the paths of the stars without missing by an inch. People who invented strict legal systems and recorded every sack of wheat in storage. If the Sumerians were practical and intelligent enough to create the entire foundation of the modern world, then why would they collectively invent a wild story about their own origin, then carefully carve it onto tens of thousands of tablets, as if it were the ultimate truth? What would happen if we set aside the arrogance of the 21st century? What would happen if we read the Sumerian texts not as science fiction, but as historical reports? They were not making stories up. They were recording what they had truly witnessed. And once you begin to believe those records, you will have to face a question that shakes the entire history of humanity. Who were these beings called the Anunnaki, really? And what did they come here to do? The gods of the Sumerians. If the great pyramids of Egypt are monuments of stone, then the legacy of Sumer is made of libraries of clay. Thousands of small clay tablets dried beneath the blazing sun or fired in the heat of the desert have survived for 5,000 years. On their surfaces are wedge-shaped marks that may appear lifeless and dry at first glance. But once they are deciphered, they return a voice to the first civilization of humanity. Within that treasure house, some tablets carefully record beer rations for workers. Some record contracts for the purchase of a field. Some preserve proverbs, prayers, and hymns. But hidden among tens of thousands of everyday documents, one name appears again and again, casting its shadow over the entire worldview of Mesopotamia, Anunnaku, or the name most familiar to us today, Anunnaki. You know, when the Sumerians spoke about the Anunnaki, they were not talking about vague, invisible spirits or empty concepts. They wrote about specific individuals, beings with names, clear roles, unpredictable temperaments, and even political rivalry between factions. And reigning at the highest point of this divine system was a great triangle of power, Anu, Enlil, and Enki. Among them, Anu was like the father of the sky, the supreme authority. His throne was placed in the highest heaven. Although Anu rarely descended personally to the earthly realm, his will was the law that shaped the destiny of both gods and human beings. Sumerian kings always tried to prove that their thrones had received Anu's approval, because only he embodied the absolute order of the cosmos. To invoke the name of Anu was to summon the highest court of creation. Beneath Anu stood Enlil, lord of air, and Storms, the one who held real governing power over the earth. If Anu was a distant chief executive officer on the highest floor, then Enlil was the executive director present on the ground. His hand was the wind. His judgments were extremely swift and deeply severe. Sumerian texts describe Enlil as a stern being who demanded absolute obedience and was ready to punish without mercy. Yet, Enlil was also the one who granted kingship, supervised the rhythm of the harvests, and maintained the life of civilization through iron discipline. He was the embodiment of holy fear. Then we have Enki, Lord of the Waters. Completely different from Enlil, Enki was the god of wisdom, a clever and cunning figure. While Enlil ruled through dry decrees, Enki guided humanity through wisdom. He was the patron god of craftsman magic and secret knowledge. Enki's temple in the city of Eridu was not merely a place of worship. It was an ancient university center. Most importantly, Enki often stood on the side of human beings. When disasters of extinction approached, it was Enki who secretly whispered hidden knowledge to humanity, helping them survive the wrath of the other gods. Together, these three beings formed a divine triad. Anu was the sky, Enlil was command, and Enki was wisdom. Around them stood a crowded court of other Anunnaki and Nana, the fierce and unpredictable goddess of love and war. Utu, the sun god who brought justice, and Ninhursag, the mother goddess who protected life. What is most impressive is how vividly the clay tablets describe them. The Sumerian gods gather, make decisions, debate, plot, feel jealousy, and even experience regret. They are alive, active, and deeply involved in every corner of human life. And all of them, from the highest beings who held the fate of the cosmos to the lower gods who governed temples, were called by one shared name. One word represented the entire great court that ruled heaven and earth: Anunnaki. In the mind of the Sumerians, the Anunnaki rarely acted separately. They were a collective, a great family holding absolute power. When a decision of life or death for this planet had to be made, such as granting a new technology or sending down a great flood to wipe out humanity, they would not decide on their own. They would summon the great council of the Anunnaki. It was a courtroom of mighty beings where the fate of an entire civilization could be decided through debates and a few nods. But what would happen if the Sumerians were not using metaphor, but recording real events? What would happen if they were the most honest historians? If they saw a winged being descending from the sky and they simply carved down exactly what their own eyes had seen? In reality, the name Anunnaki is not a modern invention created by science fiction filmmakers. It appears clearly in ancient Mesopotamian texts in Akkadian as Anunnaku or Anunnaki. But its meaning is something that must be interpreted with extreme care. If you browse videos online, many people will confidently claim that Anunnaki means those who came down from heaven. That translation sounds extremely attractive. It is perfect for conspiracy theory. However, the academic world, including projects such as ORACC at the University of Pennsylvania, is far more cautious. In Mesopotamian scholarship, Anunna, or Anunnaki, is usually understood as royal offspring, noble descendants, or a group of gods belonging to the lineage of Anu. It is tied to divine lineage and heavenly order, and linguists do not rush to conclude that it means extraterrestrials. However, even if we do not claim that they traveled in flying saucers, the Sumerian texts repeatedly demonstrate one core worldview: civilization was not created by human beings alone. The strongest evidence lies in the Sumerian king list. The famous opening line of this document states clearly, "After kingship had descended from heaven, kingship was in Eridu." The text then continues by listing kings who ruled before the Great Flood, with reigns lasting thousands of years. Clearly, according to the Sumerians, political order and authority did not begin with the ambition of mortals. It began when a pattern of rule was dropped from heaven. This worldview is further reinforced in the text Enki and the World Order. In it, Enki is not merely a water god sitting and receiving offerings. He's more like a chief architect. The text describes Enki directly arranging how to use the plow, the ox yoke irrigation canals, brick molds, and agricultural land, farming architecture, and the order of cities. All of it belongs to a design organized by the gods. This leads us to one of the most complex and fascinating concepts of the Sumerians, the concept of the Me, the sacred source code. In the myth Inanna and Enki, the transfer of the arts of civilization, the Sumerians listed a series of Me. You can understand the Me as decrees or as source code programs that operate every aspect of civilization, from kingship, priesthood, law, art, music, to war and peace. For the Sumerians, civilization had a divine source code behind it. Writing and law were not things human beings simply invented on their own. They were Me, transmitted and activated by the gods. But this is where everything begins to take on a darker color. The Anunnaki were not only beings who gave the light of civilization. In some traditions, they were symbols of cold judgment. Take, for example, the text Inanna's Descent. When the goddess Inanna tries to leave the underworld, the Anunnaki are the divine group that seizes her and issues a cruel law: anyone who rises from the underworld must have another life take their place. At this moment, the Anunnaki appear like a jury at the gate of death, seeing through the human soul with the eyes of the grave. And if you are wondering where human beings stand on this great map, the answer may make you feel very small. In the Akkadian epic, Atrahasis from the 18th century before Christ, the story begins with the lower gods being forced to perform heavy labor digging canals until they rebel against the higher gods. To solve this strike, the gods create human beings, our only purpose to carry the manual labor on behalf of the gods. Here, once again, we must be very clear. The Atrahasis Epic says human beings were created to labor within the mythological world. Later, the writer Zecharia, Sitchin, interpreted this into the theory that the Anunnaki were extraterrestrials who genetically modified humanity to make slaves for mining gold. Sitchin's theory created extremely popular documentaries. But you need to remember that is a modern interpretation from popular culture, not a conclusion of Mesopotamian studies. As time went on, the image of the Anunnaki continued to change. From the Sumerian period, they passed into Akkadian, Babylonian, and Assyrian traditions. In the Babylonian creation epic Enuma Elish, the Anunnaki are assigned positions by the supreme god Marduk after a cosmic scale battle. They are not a fixed group, but a divine council governing from the heavens to the earth and down to the depths of the underworld. And their existence does not appear only in invisible lines of writing. Archaeologists have found enormous temples at Uruk-Eridu and Nippur. They have excavated cylinder seals, engraved with detailed scenes of gods interacting with kings, towering ziggurat architecture, and royal treasures of almost unbelievable refinement. These artifacts prove that the Mesopotamians had an extremely developed religious and ritual system. Although the academic world has not found any portrait photograph confirming that the Anunnaki were extraterrestrials, and images of gods wearing horned crowns with wings holding rings are usually explained as systems of symbolism. One fact cannot be denied: the Anunnaki are entirely real figures in history. And for every Sumerian, their entire worldview rested on one absolute belief: the Anunnaki were present, powerful, and decisive in every beat of life. From the floodwaters of the Tigris River to the wheat seed sprouting in the field, from the rise of a king to the collapse of an entire empire, nothing escaped their reach. And that power over life and death leads us to one of the most dramatic events ever carved into clay, the Great Flood. This was the moment when Enlil decided to wipe out humanity, and Enki found a way to save them. It was a story carrying such immense weight that it echoed through many cultures across thousands of years afterward, and eventually was retold in full within the Bible through the image of Noah's Ark. Among the tens of thousands of clay tablets excavated in Mesopotamia, few stories place the Anunnaki at the center of humanity's survival as clearly as the Great Flood. According to Sumerian and Akkadian records, when humanity began multiplying and spreading everywhere, growth came with noise. And with noise came dissatisfaction. Enlil, Lord of Storms, began to grow restless because of the noise of humanity. The texts describe him as extremely disturbed, even enraged by the unceasing cries rising from the earth. And his solution was unimaginably ruthless annihilation. In a meeting of the Divine Council, Enlil issued the final judgment: a violent storm and floodwaters would sweep across the earth, completely wiping out this noisy species. But right here, the story turns in a direction that feels very familiar to us. Enki, the god of waters and wisdom, could not simply stand by and watch humanity be destroyed. Unlike Enlil, he had a deep bond with human beings. He was the one who had taught them crafts and guided their survival. Watching them disappear was something Enki could not accept, so he acted. Enki did not appear openly because that would mean opposing the decision of the entire Great Council. Instead, he acted in secret in a way that fit his clever nature. The clay tablets tell us that Enki secretly whispered a warning to a mortal man. That man was named Ziusudra in the Sumerian version, later called Utnapishtim in the Akkadian version, and finally became Noah in the Hebrew Bible. Enki told Ziusudra to build a gigantic boat, seal it tightly with bitumen, bring his family aboard, and most importantly, carry the seeds of every living creature and the best craftsmen in order to preserve the skills of civilization. Abandon wealth, leave possessions behind, Enki advised. Save life. And so, when the sky collapsed and the rivers burst their banks, the boat of Ziusudra rose above the waters. For 7 days and 7 nights, the raging flood drowned every city, erased every field, and completely silenced the noise that had once enraged Enlil. When the waters receded, the boat came to rest. Ziusudra stepped out, offered a sacrifice, and gave thanks to the gods. When Enlil discovered that human beings had survived, at first he erupted in anger because his decree had been challenged. But then, faced with what had already happened, and perhaps because of the gentle intervention of other gods, he calmed down. Instead of total extermination, humanity was given a new covenant. The Great Council decided human lifespan would be shortened. Population would be controlled, but humanity would be allowed to continue existing. Do you recognize this strange coincidence? A divine decision to cleanse the earth, a righteous man chose in the building of a gigantic vessel to preserve living species. And yet the version carved onto Sumerian clay is older than the Bible you are holding in your hands by more than 1,000 years. It is the original version of a terrifying memory that spread across the world. What does this story tell us? For the Sumerians, it taught one core lesson. Humanity owed its very existence to the Anunnaki. They were the beings who held power over life and death, the ones who created the rules of the world. Of course, if you bring these clay tablets to most modern scholars, they will smile and answer with one short word: mythology. To mainstream science, stories about gods descending from the sky are beautiful and symbolic, but absolutely not historical evidence. Textbooks always assume that writing mathematics and the wheel were certainly created by human genius alone, with no divine teacher involved. But then, an extremely difficult problem appears. When linguists began translating deeper into the Sumerian clay tablets, they found passages that did not look like metaphorical poetry at all. They looked exactly like a computer data file. The ancient priests were not only writing poems, they were recording the precise movements of the universe. Picture this with the naked eye on clay tablets thousands of years old. The Sumerians specifically identified Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn as moving planets completely different from the fixed stars. They recognized that the bright star at dawn and the shining star at twilight were actually one and the same planet, Venus, and they were able to chart its predictive cycle. They divided the sky into constellations. They designed a base 60 mathematical system that allowed them to handle complex astronomical angles smoothly. And the peak of the confusion lies in a text called the Venus Tablet of Amisaduqa. This text tracks the cycle of Venus with such astonishing precision that when modern astronomers compare it with computer-generated data today, many of the numbers still match perfectly. This is no longer mythology. This is astrophysics. And it forces science to face an unavoidable question. How did they do it? Recognizing complex retrograde planetary motion and predicting long-term cycles stretching across decades is not something you can observe by accident while herding sheep. It requires a systematic science. And the Sumerians did it thousands of years before the Greeks, long before Galileo created the first telescope. The academic world offers 3 hypotheses to explain this absurdity. The first hypothesis is extremely conservative and safe patient observation across many generations. Scholars suggest that Mesopotamian priests had the time and discipline to record nightly sky journals for centuries. By storing meticulous records, the mathematical patterns eventually emerged. No miracle is needed here, only time and iron discipline. The second hypothesis opens the question a little wider: cultural inheritance. It suggests that the Sumerians may have actually picked up knowledge from an older and more advanced forgotten civilization, similar to what people are discovering at the megasite of Göbekli Tepe. In other words, this knowledge did not originate with the Sumerians, but was a buried legacy that we have not yet fully excavated. Both of these hypotheses are reasonable and accepted by the academic world as starting points. But the clay tablets themselves say something completely different. The Sumerians never said they observed the sky for thousands of years, nor did they claim to inherit this knowledge from another civilization. They wrote only one thing this knowledge was given, and this opens the third hypothesis, one that steps completely out of archaeology and into the most shocking philosophical space instruction from above. If we translate the Sumerian texts literally, then the Anunnaki were not a metaphor. Perhaps a form of advanced intelligence, whether human civilizations far ahead of their time or beings not belonging to this planet, directly intervened, playing the role of hands-on teachers who helped Sumerian astronomy leap thousands of years ahead. Of course, scholars look at this third hypothesis with a skeptical frown. But to the public, it is the most seductive and logical explanation. It explains why the clay tablets write so coldly and precisely about God's teaching human beings. And then in the year 1976, one man boldly stepped across that line of doubt and turned this hypothesis into a real bombshell that shook the world. His name was Zecharia Sitchin, and his book, The 12th Planet, became the fuse for a wild but impossible to ignore idea, which was Zecharia Sitchin and the Extraterrestrial Hypothesis. In the year 1976, a scholar named Zecharia Sitchin stepped forward and offered a shocking perspective. He looked at the clay tablets, looked at the images of the gods, and decided to strip away the entire outer layer of religion or mythology that the academic world had placed over them. According to Sitchin's interpretation, the Anunnaki were not invisible spirits floating on clouds. They were flesh and blood beings. And they came from a distant world called Nibiru. He argued that Nibiru is a planet with an extremely elongated elliptical orbit. It spends thousands of years wandering at the dark outer edge of space before returning to pass through the inner solar system. And every time its orbit brings Nibiru to perihelion, meaning its closest approach as it passes near Earth. It creates a perfect time window for interplanetary travel. Sitchin did something no one had done before he turned the gods on the clay tablets into an actual crew. There were commanders, engineers, and medical specialists. They traveled between their mother planet orbital stations and bases established on Earth in a massive operation. An operation measured not in years or months, but in ages. But the question is, why did they come here to build civilization for fun? No. Sitchin's hypothesis gives them an extremely practical, cold, and survival-driven motive. The atmosphere of the planet Nibiru was weakening and tearing apart. To save their homeworld, the Anunnaki needed a special material that could be dispersed into an ultra-thin shield across the atmosphere to reflect radiation and retain heat. That material was gold, and our Earth was full of gold. The first stage of the mission, according to Sitchin, focused entirely on surveying choosing sites and establishing mining operations. Try rereading the ancient texts through this lens. When the Sumerians wrote about the gods descending to Earth, opening the Apsu or digging where the dark waters remained, this was not poetry about the underworld. It was coded documentation of drilling, tunneling, mining, and building industrial infrastructure. This crew established command centers, transfer points, and logistical hubs. And the entire Mesopotamian plain, the region the Sumerians called Eden, was the central stage of that operation. Within this operating system, the high-ranking Anunnaki sat in the command room and supervised. The heavy labor of digging gold in mud and dark tunnels was assigned to a lower group of beings called the Igigi. But every limit has a breaking point. Over time, the enormous workload and harsh conditions in the mines triggered a rebellion. A large-scale strike. This scene was actually preserved with remarkable clarity in the Atrahasis Epic, only clothed in the garment of mythology, with the complaint of the lower gods. The work is too heavy, the trouble is too much. Facing the danger that the mission might fail because of a labor shortage, the Great Council of the Anunnaki was forced to find a drastic solution. They needed a new worker. But they did not build machines made of metal. They created a biological machine. A hybrid living creature strong enough for manual labor, intelligent enough to be trained, and most importantly, capable of reproducing on its own in order to provide an endless labor force. This is where Sitchin merges the creation traditions of Sumer, Akkad, and Babylon together. When the ancient texts describe the gods forming humanity from clay mixed with the blood of a god, Sitchin does not see magic. He sees genetic intervention. And where was their laboratory? It was Eden itself, not a peaceful paradise garden full of sweet apples, but a tightly controlled biological facility. The key figures in this project were Enki, the chief engineer and brilliant scientist, and Ninhursag, also known as Ninti, the female specialist in medicine and genetics. The first successful hybrid test subject was called Adamu. According to Sitchin, the early versions of Adamu were very strong but sterile. A later biological software update was introduced, allowing this creature to reproduce through mating. That was the moment when a laboratory project officially became a self-sustaining population. The labor crisis had been solved. As human beings began to multiply, the mission of the Anunnaki also changed. They could no longer focus only on mining gold, but had to manage a crowded workforce. As humanity expanded, the Anunnaki began selecting the most capable groups and giving them a starter package of civilization, including irrigation and agriculture, how to dig canals, build dikes and understand seasonal cycles, mathematics, giving them the base 60 counting system to calculate fractions and measure angles, writing and accounting, teaching them to use cuneiform to count wheat record labor days and track inventory. Astronomy and calendars, how to follow the cycles of the moon, the sun, and the paths of the planets. Architecture and planning, how to build massive ziggurat towers and divide urban districts. And finally, kingship and law, establishing a centralized governing system that had descended from heaven. In Sitchin's reading, the concept of the sacred me, the divine decrees, were actually protocols, knowledge modules, like data drives handed to each city-state to operate. The strange symbols we see on stone walls, the winged disc, the stylized tree of life, and the giant humanoid figures were not artistic imagination. They were humanity's visual memory of flying machines, genetic editing technology, and the technical suits of astronauts. The royal project worshipped by the Sumerians was in reality a management franchise model. Human beings were appointed as kings in the name of the Anunnaki, with one task: maintain order and guarantee production quotas. But then, as the human population exploded, their noise and chaos began to spiral beyond control. Tension arose within the Anunnaki themselves. The Supreme Commander Enlil wanted to carry out a hard reset, wiping everything clean and starting over. The Chief Engineer Enki, however, wanted to preserve his biological creation out of compassion. When a massive flood disaster was about to strike, possibly a natural catastrophe caused by cosmic cycles, or perhaps triggered by a weapon they themselves activated, Enlil's faction was determined to stand by and watch humanity drown. But Enki secretly leaked the warning. A man named Zeusudra, or Noah, built the vessel, preserved the genetic code of living creatures, and survived the catastrophe. When the waters receded, the system was restarted, but with far stricter rules. The lifespan of human beings, which had originally been designed to last a very long time, was artificially shortened. Kingship was once again reissued from heaven to chosen bloodlines. This change is recorded very clearly in the Sumerian king list. The pre-flood kings lived for astonishing lengths of time. But immediately after the flood, their reigns suddenly became shorter, a clear signal of a new biological order. After the flood, Sitchin's hypothesis suggests that the Anunnaki began dividing the world again among key figures to govern. Human beings were no longer merely mud-covered miners. They were upgraded into scribes, artisans, leaders, and priests. We became a species shepherded within a carefully planned ecosystem. Sitchin even expanded the Anunnaki map across the globe. The enormous megalithic monuments, the pyramids of Egypt and South America. He did not read them as temples, but as part of a global network. They were spaceports, signal sites, and navigation markers for logistical flights. The ziggurat temples were actually multifunctional towers on the surface. Religion served as a cover, but the inner core served space technology. And then, one day, when the atmospheric situation on Nibiru had stabilized, or when the mining objective had been completed, the presence of the Anunnaki gradually thinned out. Instead of ruling directly, they handed authority to human kings as their representatives. The legitimacy of these kings did not come from ability, but from bloodline, the result of traditions about unions between gods and humans, producing semi-divine lineages. The opening line of the Sumerian king list, kingship, descended from heaven through Sitchin's lens, is a raw truth. Power was transferred from a crew preparing to leave to human representatives, requiring them to maintain law and religious rituals, as a perfect cover for a long-term handover. Now look again at those stone cylinder seals. The winged disc, a stylized depiction of a spacecraft. The giant bearded figures standing beside small human beings. Not a metaphor for office, but a true size ratio. The motif of the tree of life. A symbol of control over genetic and agricultural technology. Even the phrase, "the gods made a decree," actually means the command board finalized the plan. And if all of this is true, Sitchin left the ending open, a loop unsettling enough to keep people awake at night. If the orbit of the planet Nibiru is real, if the Anunnaki were not mythology but historical actors, then that elliptical orbit works like a cosmic clock. There will be time windows that bring them back. It is no coincidence that across ancient cultures around the world, from Mesopotamia to the Americas, there has always been an obsession with the return. Prophecies about cyclical ages, traditions that are not the final chapter, but commands still remaining in force. Remember who taught you preserve the rituals, and wait for those from the sky to return. That is the full hypothesis of Zecharia Sitchin. Many people will hear it and laugh, saying it sounds exactly like the script of a science fiction movie. But do you know what the most frightening part is? Sitchin did not invent any of the words. He did not tear apart or distort the clay tablets. He simply did one thing. He stopped treating the Sumerians as dreamers who enjoyed writing fairy tales. If you read those ancient texts literally word by word, they are no longer mythology. They are a work report, a travel log clear to the point of brutality. Search for resources, land exploit labor, perform biological hybridization, establish a management system, and then quietly withdraw. But if the Anunnaki truly withdrew, where did they withdraw to? For half a century, modern astronomy laughed at the Sumerian idea of a giant planet wandering at the outer edge of the solar system. The existence of a planet with an elliptical orbit lasting thousands of years, sometimes hidden and sometimes appearing, was considered physically impossible and purely science fiction. But in recent years, the smile of the scientific world has gradually begun to fade. Extremely unusual gravitational disturbances in the darkest region of the solar system. The Kuiper Belt are forcing NASA and the world's largest observatories to frantically turn their lenses in the same direction. Science calls that gravitational ghost planet 9. But those who have studied the clay tablets of Mesopotamia know exactly what name that hidden giant in the darkness carries. And the most chilling thing is not merely its existence, but the strange traces people are beginning to see when they turn their eyes in that direction. The discovery of Anunnaki traces on the fire planet Nibiru. If the story of the Anunnaki only remained silent on the clay tablets of Iraq, perhaps it would have ended as a purely archaeological topic. But what makes this legend continue to haunt humanity, exploding into endless debates even today, is that some people believe the traces of those who descended from the sky are not found only on Earth. They may appear in a place far more distant, Mars, the rusty red planet right beside us. When the first high-resolution photographs from Mars were widely released by NASA, the planet immediately became a kind of archaeological desert in the human imagination. Its surface was lifeless. There were no trees, no cities glowing with lights, no sound. There were only rocks, dust-deep canyons, and long shadows cast beneath the distant sun. But precisely within that deathly silence, some photographs made viewers hold their breath. A rock formation with lines that looked exactly like a human face. A protruding ridge that reminded people of the Sphinx of Egypt. And especially NASA's Curiosity rover once sent back a photograph showing a rock formation whose shape looked disturbingly like a carved statue of an Anunnaki god in Sumerian belief. For those who believe in extraterrestrial civilizations, this is the abandoned remnant of an interplanetary stopover station. But for scientists, they have a very cold term for this phenomenon: pareidolia, a psychological illusion. It is the automatic mechanism of the human brain, always trying to find familiar shapes, such as faces or statues, when looking at completely random objects. That hesitation was only the beginning. The story truly exploded when a three-sided pyramid object appeared in the image data. In Candor Cosma, a region within the enormous canyon system of Valles Marineris, stretching like a crack torn across the red planet, the high-rise camera on the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter captured a very strange structure. It lies alone on the rough surface with one smooth face and slanted edges that immediately remind people of deliberate architecture. UFO hunting communities, especially researcher Scott C. Waring, analyzed the image proportions and estimated that the object measures about 40 by 30 meters. To them, this cannot be a coincidence of nature. Of course, as soon as these images caused a stir, mainstream science and magazines such as IFL Science quickly poured cold water on the excitement. They argued that the object's size 40 by 30 meters is far too small when compared with the Great Pyramids of Giza. Planetary geologists quickly concluded that it is merely the product of pareidolia psychological illusion and the brutal erosion caused by Martian sandstorms over millions of years, which accidentally carved a natural rock into an angular structure. But if we take one step back and look at the issue realistically, this logic begins to reveal enormous holes. Think about the laws of nature. Over time, erosion by wind and sand usually tends to wear down sharp edges, turning everything rounder and smoother. But the object in the Kandor-Kazma Canyon region has flat faces, sharp diagonal edges, and converges into a nearly perfect geometric peak. What are the odds that chaotic winds accidentally sculpted a structure with such mathematical precision? Almost zero. And is 40 by 30 meters too small? We seem to be forgetting a harsh truth about Mars. Its surface has been continuously draped and buried by global superstorms of dust for millions of years. What gives anyone the right to say that the 40-meter object captured by the high-rise camera is the entire structure? What if it is only the top of a gigantic superpyramid, while its massive body is buried beneath tens of meters of dark red sand? This is no longer the blurry boundary of imagination. The truth is, the NASA image is real. That unnatural geometric structure is real. If you find only one triangular rock, you can call it coincidence. But when you find a statue resembling the Sumerian gods, then find a pyramid structure and a series of rocks shaped like sphinxes on the same planet. Blaming it all on psychological illusion begins to look like an escape from the truth. Mars is not accidentally projecting our psychology back at us. Very possibly, it is exposing a physical scene, a ruin, an abandoned interplanetary outpost. It serves as a physical piece of steel-like evidence, reinforcing what the Sumerians tried to tell us through tens of thousands of clay tablets. Before descending to the Mesopotamian plains of Earth to launch human civilization, those who came down from the sky may have once stopped and built enormous transit stations on the Red Planet. And this hypothesis is further fueled by the name Nibiru. As Zecharia Sitchin once argued, Nibiru was the homeland of the Anunnaki. Supporters of Sitchin believe that Nibiru is the mysterious Planet 9 or Planet X hidden within the solar system. However, we need to stay extremely clear-minded at this point. NASA and observatories truly are hunting for the gravitational ghost of a hypothetical Planet 9. But the scientific world, as Space.com states, completely rejects the image of Nibiru as an end-times planet filled with extraterrestrials preparing to crash into Earth. It is precisely the distance between actual data and human interpretation that creates the irresistible pull of this mystery. And then to search for the final answer, we are forced to turn our eyes away from the red canyons of Mars and return to the ground, back to the most silent, yet also the most haunting artifact left behind by the first civilization of humanity, their own form. If you ever step into the ancient galleries of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Met in New York, or read respected archaeological reports from the Tel Asmar site, you will have to face a chilling truth. The worshipped statues of the Sumerians from the early dynastic period do not resemble any other art of the same era. Their bodies are carved in a frozen state. Their two hands are clasped tightly before the chest in a posture of absolute submission. But all your attention will be pulled toward one single point: their faces, or more precisely, their enormous eyes. They were carved far too large, breaking every normal biological proportion of the human body and inlaid with vivid blue lapis lazuli. They do not blink. They do not turn away. They seem to look straight through space. From the official academic perspective, archaeologists explain that those wide-open eyes symbolize spiritual wakefulness. The Sumerians buried these statues beneath the floors of ziggurat temples to serve as representatives of themselves, keeping their gaze constantly present before the gods, even when their real bodies had left. That explanation is scientific and very safe. But when you take those enormous eyes and place them at the center of the Anunnaki chain of events, a chill begins to run down your spine. Look carefully at those eyes. They are not the calm eyes of someone meditating or praying over abstract religious concepts. They are the eyes of awe, of overwhelming fear. They are the frozen expression of a small creature looking upward at a superior power of flesh and blood. A power so great that it suffocated their entire worldview and existence. The Sumerians saw themselves as slaves created to serve. Their entire civilization, from mathematics and astronomy to supercities, was not in their eyes a source of human pride, but the copyright of those who came down from the sky. They did not carve these statues merely for decoration. They carved them to preserve the moment when our species bowed beneath the feet of the architects of the cosmos. These three enormous pieces, the clay tablets that clearly record the diary of descent in Mesopotamia, the cold, artificial-looking geometric structures rising out of Martian dust storms, and the eternal wide-open blue eyes of the Sumerians. All of them are weaving a web of evidence across space and time. It is too perfect to be called a random coincidence. Modern science may still be waiting for clear physical evidence, such as a fragment of a spacecraft dug from beneath the ground, before it is willing to believe. But when we connect all the legacies the Sumerians left behind, the most haunting question is no longer the debate over whether the Anunnaki were real. The real question is this: what world-shaking event did our first civilization witness? That even thousands of years later, every time we see a pyramid-shaped rock standing alone on a dead planet, the entire memory of those who came down from the sky rises again and haunts the human mind. However, we must acknowledge one thing: Zecharia Sitchin's hypothesis of extraterrestrials mining gold has faced countless fierce objections from the academic world. Mainstream archaeology considers it an excessive interpretation. But if Sitchin was wrong, then how does science explain another chilling phenomenon? That is when we step beyond the borders of the Mesopotamian plain. The story of gods descending to the world does not fade away. On the contrary, it multiplies. Across burning deserts, isolated mountain ranges, and oceans that seemed impossible to cross, the ancients, all carved onto stone, sang in rituals and built their entire worldview around one single theme: humanity's knowledge came from the sky. Let us search for those global echoes together to see whether the myths of the ancients or the hypotheses of modern people are holding the truth. The mystery of the Dogon tribe and the Sirius star realm. Nowhere does this echo ring out more mysteriously and more difficult to explain than in West Africa among the Dogon people of Mali. The Dogon live in isolation on the rugged Bandiagara Plateau, a land of sandstone cliffs and hidden valleys. For centuries, they carried a cosmological system so detailed that when French anthropologists first heard them speak of it in the 1920s, the scientific world was stunned. According to the elders, the ancestors of the Dogon were once visited by beings who descended to Earth from a fiery ark. They called these half-human, half-aquatic beings the Nommo, the ones who brought them sacred knowledge. But the most shocking part does not lie in the myth itself. It lies in the astronomical data. The Nommo told the Dogon about the Sirius star system. They did not only describe Sirius A, the brightest star in the night sky, but also affirmed the existence of a companion orbiting it. A tiny star invisible to the naked eye, yet made from some of the heaviest matter in the universe. Modern science calls it Sirius B, a white dwarf located 8.6 light-years away from us. The problem is that Western astronomy could not observe it until the middle of the 19th century with a telescope. And it was not until 1970 that the first clear photograph of it was taken. And yet the Dogon, who had no telescopes, no writing system, and lived thousands of miles from the Mediterranean coast, knew about it precisely centuries earlier. They knew that Sirius B takes exactly 50 years to orbit Sirius A. They carved that elliptical orbit onto sacred drawings and made masks to honor it. And they swore that this knowledge had been given to them from the sky. For supporters of the ancient astronaut theory, this is steel evidence. How could a Bronze Age tribe know about the density and orbital cycle of a white dwarf without outside intervention? Of course, anthropologists have tried to explain that this may be information contamination, meaning that missionaries or even French researchers themselves may have accidentally leaked astronomical knowledge to the Dogon before recording it. But for those who believe in the Anunnaki, the Dogon are a second Mesopotamia, and they are not alone in Africa. Farther south in Sierra Leone, local traditions tell of small stone statues called nomoli, believed to have fallen directly from the sky. Alongside them, people sometimes find strange blue stones, called sky stones. Geological analysis shows that they contain unusual components that do not match the surrounding minerals. For science, their origin remains a question mark. But for the local people, they are material remnants of visits from the upper realms of space, echoes from the barren desert of the American Southwest. Crossing the Atlantic and moving deep into the high desert plateau of New Mexico, the landscape opens like an epic carved in sandstone. Amid dry air and the cry of hawks, enormous stone mesas rise like prehistoric fortresses. On the walls of these fortresses, ancient tribes left behind thousands of petroglyphs. Mixed among familiar spiral patterns and hunting scenes, strange beings suddenly appear. They are towering humanoid figures dominating the landscape. Their heads are abnormally enlarged, and their faces are obscured by sharp lines radiating outward, like halos or like transmitting antennas. Their eyes are deeply carved wide open, freezing their gaze from the silence of the desert. For the Hopi people, these are absolutely not abstract art. They are the Kachina spirits who brought knowledge down from the stars. Every year when drought tightens its grip on the Southwest, Hopi dancers wear brilliant dome-shaped masks, recreating the image of the Kachina to pray for rain. Even more unsettling within the Hopi body of tradition, there exists a concept called Anu Sinom, the ant people who guided their ancestors underground to survive an end-time catastrophe. The name carries a sound disturbingly similar to Anu, the supreme god of the Sumerians, half a world away. Nearby, the Zuni people also preserve a similar memory. Their rock walls bear the figures of sky guardians. They were not strangers merely passing across the sky, but teachers who personally descended, teaching them directly from how to plant corn in dry soil to the moral system needed for survival. Try standing beneath the skin-burning sun of New Mexico and asking yourself, did a prehistoric stone carver have spare time to carve fantasies? No, they were recording an event. Mainstream archaeology often dismisses these dome-headed, enlarged-bodied figures with the phrase, shamanic visions, the result of hallucinations caused by herbs. But critics immediately push back. Why would the spontaneous hallucinations of primitive people accurately sketch a visor joints and a space travel suit thousands of years before human beings understood what a zero-gravity environment was? No matter how fierce the debate becomes, We still have to face a major paradox if these beings were only interplanetary colonizers who came to exploit resources. Why were they worshipped? The legacy they left behind in the desert was not soulless machines, but laws, culture, and the foundations of agriculture. The stone walls of the Americas are repeating exactly the same whisper carried by Sumerian clay. Those who brought knowledge from above were always honored as gods. And that whisper was not imprisoned between lonely cliffs or dry plains. It crossed thousands of miles of ocean and ignited the fire of knowledge in another desert, where reverence for powers from the sky was carved into eternal superstructures. The bird-headed gods and the strange skull structures of Egypt. Moving eastward across the Mediterranean Sea, the dry heat of the desert gives way to the Nile, the umbilical cord that nourished one of the greatest civilizations in human history, ancient Egypt. And here the script of teachers from the sky rises again in a chilling way. On towering granite walls, the gods of Egypt appear in half-human, half-animal forms. Horus, with the head of a deadly falcon, Anubis, with the jackal's snout guarding the gate of the underworld, and Thoth, with the head of an ibis. Today, textbooks call this totem worship or artistic symbolism. But to the ancient Egyptians, it was not a metaphor. They considered these the true forms of flesh and blood powers that had once directly governed them. The most prominent among this divine council was Thoth. He was not merely a god sitting and receiving offerings, but the chief engineer of cosmic intelligence. The Egyptians affirmed that Thoth was the one who designed hieroglyphs, which they respectfully called the language of the gods. He calculated the orbits of the stars, outlined an accurate calendar system, and gave human beings the scales of law. The similarity here strikes us directly. Mesopotamia honored the Anunnaki for establishing cuneiform, while Egypt bowed to Thoth because of hieroglyphs. Two civilizations separated by thousands of miles. Both swore that their language fell from the stars. Then comes Osiris. In ancient writings, Osiris was not only the lord of the dead. He was the god who personally stepped down into the mud, guiding wild hunter-gatherer groups by the hand and teaching them how to domesticate wheat and establish agriculture. This motif repeats perfectly if the Sumerians named Enki as the one who granted irrigation technology. Egypt honored Osiris as the father of agriculture. The rhythm of civilization, according to both cultures, was activated by a push from outside. Yet what haunts researchers most is not only the stories. It is an unusual physiological feature carved openly during the period of Pharaoh Akhenaten. If you look carefully at the murals or royal statues of this period, you will be stunned by an unnatural anatomical structure. Their skulls are elongated. The top of the head rises high and sweeps backward in an extremely strange way, accompanied by a narrow chest and enlarged hips. Mainstream medicine and archaeology quickly label this as a genetic disorder, the custom of head binding from childhood, or merely an artistic style used to distinguish a divinized royal class. However, critics point out a physical problem. Head binding can only deform the shape of the skull. It cannot increase the cranial capacity beyond that of ordinary human beings, as some discovered skulls appear to suggest. For mystery researchers, the academic explanation feels too forced. They see here a primitive psychological effect imitation. Like a fanatical ritual, the practice of skull elongation or the artistic depiction of elongated skulls may very well have been a desperate human effort to copy the appearance of superior non-earthly beings who once ruled them. Just as the Sumerian kings always proclaimed that their kingship had been lowered from heaven, the Egyptian pharaohs also positioned themselves as hybrid bloodlines of the stars. From the enormous stones assembled into the Great Pyramid to the legal codes governing society, everything revolved around an unshakable core belief: supreme power and knowledge were never the invention of mortals. They were a gift, handed down by travelers of the cosmos. And the most frightening thing is this. This sky belief was absolutely not the privilege of civilized empires along great rivers. You did not need to build a giant ziggurat or wear the garments of a pharaoh in order to encounter them. The echo of these visitors reached far beyond that. It anchored itself into the cold rock walls of prehistoric Europe and hid deep beneath the seemingly impenetrable rainforests of Central America. Footprints on stone in Europe and Central America, crossing the Mediterranean Sea. Leaving behind the burning dunes of Mesopotamia and Egypt, we move deep into the old continent of Europe. Here in the coldness of the prehistoric age, similar whispers did not disappear. They simply changed form and continued to be carved forever into hard stone. Hidden within the majestic Alps of Italy lies Val Camonica. This valley contains more than 140,000 petroglyphs stretching across 8,000 years of history, forming a massive open-air library that preserves some of humanity's oldest fragments of memory. If you walk along the rock walls, you will encounter very ordinary images from the Stone Age hunters holding spears, herds of deer wheels, and early agricultural tools. But then, the rhythm of history is suddenly and violently broken when you come face to face with a group of highly out-of-place carvings. Standing out among the primitive lines is the appearance of unusual beings. Archaeologists call them by the safe name masked figures. But popular culture calls them by another more haunting name, the ancient astronauts of Val Camonica. Look carefully at their shapes. These are tall humanoid figures towering over the others. Their bodies are not carved according to normal muscular proportions, but appear swollen, bulky, and enclosed in something that looks exactly like pressurized protective suits. The most frightening part is the head. Instead of a human face, they wear closed spherical helmets. Around that helmet are deep lines radiating in all directions, sharp and decisive, looking like dazzling light, streams of radiation energy, or even radio antennas. The tools they hold in their hands are not spears or bows, but strange angular mechanical forms. And the mystery does not stop there. Right beside these astronauts, the ancients carved a refined pattern called the Communion Rose. Although it carries the name of a flower, it does not resemble any plant structure on Earth. It is a perfectly symmetrical spiral, with angles twisting into one another, according to a complex geometric law. It looks like an aerodynamic rotor structure, a diagram modeling an energy field, or an astronomical map orienting the stars. Mainstream archaeology reassures the public that these rock walls merely describe a dance ritual of shamans and that the flower is simply a solar religious symbol. But for those who have studied the Anunnaki, they cannot stop asking a chilling question. Why would a primitive person living in caves imagine a complete spacesuit and a mathematical energy field? Most likely they were not imagining at all. With the roughest carving tools, the prehistoric people of Val Camonica were acting as ancient reporters. They were frantically carving onto the cliff face. What their eyes had just witnessed a glowing machine slowly descending into the valley, followed by great beings stepping out from a radiance that dazzled an entire corner of the sky. Going even deeper into the timeline, leaving behind the busy stone cities and sinking into the cold of the Ice Age, we enter Lascaux Cave, hidden in southwestern France. A secret archive of humanity sealed away for 17,000 years. Imagine holding a flickering torch as you walk deep into the core of the cave. Around you on the rock walls are magnificent paintings made from red and black mineral pigments. Herds of wild horses, bison, and deer gallop with such life that they seem to breathe. Prehistoric people painted animals with realism, down to every muscle. But when you climb down into one of the most remote and dark pits of the cave, a place archaeologists call the Shaft of the Dead Man, this law of realism suddenly breaks apart. Among the vivid animals appears a strange hybrid, being a human figure with the head of a bird, a therianthrope. Right beside this being is the image of a bird perched on a stick. Anthropologists and archaeologists immediately offer a very familiar explanation. It is the image of a shaman. They say the painting describes a trance where the shaman uses stimulating substances to leave the body, merge the spirit with wild animals, and travel into the spirit world. That is a safe explanation. But if we step beyond the space of one dark cave and connect it with the rest of the world, a much larger and far more frightening picture appears. Place the pieces together in the Mesopotamian plain. Supreme gods, such as Enki-Ninurta or the Anunnaki, are often depicted with giant wings behind their backs. Across the Egyptian desert, the great god Thoth bears the head of an ibis, while Horus bears the head of a falcon. And now deep underground in Ice Age Europe 17,000 years ago, there is another bird-headed human. Why is it always the combination with birds? Across ancient cultures, the symbol of the bird or wings was never merely an animal. For the human mind of that era, birds were the only visual language, the only concept they could use to describe one extraordinary ability: flight. When prehistoric people saw a being hovering in the air or stepping out from a flying machine that came through the clouds, they had no words such as astronaut jet propulsion or spacecraft to record it. They could only use the greatest symbol of escape from gravity: wings and the sky. Bird people were their way of describing those who came from the upper realm of space. So what is the bird-headed man at the bottom of that deep cave? Is it only the hallucination of a shaman? Or is it the oldest prototype, the most primordial human memory of the same group of descending beings, the ones whom thousands of years later both Sumer and Egypt would bow before and honor on their stone wall? And finally, crossing the vast ocean once again, we enter the heart of Central America. Beneath the dark and dense rainforest canopy of Guatemala and southern Mexico, the ruins of one of the most mysterious civilizations in history lie silent: the Maya civilization. Their massive stone pyramids pierce through the ancient trees, rising straight toward the sky as if trying to reach the stars. To understand the mind of the Maya, we must open the Popol Vuh, their sacred text often called their Bible. In it, the tradition says that after many failed attempts to create human beings from mud or wood, the gods successfully formed humanity from a survival material, cornmeal. But having a completed body was still not enough. These first human beings lived in darkness and silence. For civilization to truly be activated, the gods personally descended to earth, most prominently the god Kukulkan, the feathered serpent. They did not give human beings ordinary hunting tools. They gave humanity the ultimate weapon: language, the ability to think, and most especially, understanding of time through the calendar system. For the Maya, the ability to speak and count days was direct divine intervention, and that intervention left physical traces that still amaze science today. Many mainstream scholars remain puzzled. How did the Maya invent a mathematical and astronomical system so far ahead of its time? The clearest evidence lies in a surviving treasure called the Dresden Codex. This is not an ordinary history book. It is a sky map encoded in hieroglyphs. In this book, the Maya recorded the rising and setting cycles of Venus with terrifying precision. Their calendar calculated the orbit of this planet across thousands of years, leaving an error of only a few hours. How did they do it? They lived in dense rainforest with no telescopes, no computers, and no optical instruments. Observation by the naked eye through thick forest canopies surely could not produce such a perfect mathematical result. Facing this mystery, modern astronomers once again have to scratch their heads exactly as they once struggled with the Sumerian Venus tablet we mentioned earlier. At this point, step back and look at the whole map of the world. Repeat, repeat, and repeat again. From Asia, Africa, and Europe, all all the way to the Americas. These continents were separated by vast oceans. Their languages were completely isolated, with no opportunity for trade exchange. Their climates, living conditions, and historical periods had no direct connection to one another. And yet, whether it is the Dogon elder in the deserts of Mali, the Hopi indigenous person on the cliffs of New Mexico, the Maya priest in the wild rainforest, or the Sumerian astrologers on the Mesopotamian plain, all of them are telling the same story. In one voice, humanity's knowledge did not grow out of the ground by itself. It descended from the sky. Facing this strange convergence, we are left with only two ways to explain it. Either this is the greatest random psychological coincidence in the history of evolution, where all human beings across the planet use the same kind of mythology to explain their own intelligence, or it is the real remnant of a global event, a great encounter that forever changed the DNA of human civilization. If you choose to believe the second perspective, then Zecharia Sitchin's ancient astronaut hypothesis seems to be the most perfect answer. It assembles every piece so neatly. It turns mythology into historical reality and turns the gods into travelers of the cosmos. And yet, historical truth is rarely as easy and perfect as a Hollywood screenplay. When we temporarily take our eyes off the stars and lower our gaze to examine each carved mark on the clay, that science fiction's shell begins to peel away. And that is when we are forced to face the hidden corners that flying saucer hunters always want to avoid. The strange problems in the extraterrestrial hypothesis. We have to admit that for a moment, Zecharia Sitchin's ancient astronaut hypothesis sounds extremely attractive. It feels like a master key that neatly explains everything, the ancient world's astronomical knowledge far ahead of its time. The sudden explosion of civilization and the strangely similar myths found across the globe. Extraterrestrial visitors came, they taught, and then they left. Problem solved. But when we truly examine this hypothesis under the light of historical study, that perfect picture begins to show serious cracks. If we want to decode the Sumerians, we must respect their own voice. And this counter-argument must begin with language. On the clay tablets, the beings who descended to Earth are collectively called Anunnaki, a name tightly connected with the god and the god who ruled the highest heaven. In every ritual context of Mesopotamia, this was not a casual nickname for strangers. Its original meaning is those who came down from heaven to earth within the broader classification of Anunna, the gods of An. Let us study more deeply the way the Sumerians chose their words. This is a crucial detail. If the Anunnaki were truly a crew that came to Earth to extract minerals, we would certainly expect to find mechanical or technical terms. But what is the truth? Across tens of thousands of excavated clay tablets, the Mesopotamian priests absolutely did not call the Anunnaki travelers, explorers, or interplanetary mining crews. Instead, they clothed the Anunnaki in a language of absolute sacredness. These beings do not appear in construction site progress reports or machinery maintenance manuals. They are summoned with reverent fear in hymns. They do not wear protective suits and sit pressing buttons in a cockpit. They reign in a sacred great council, coldly issuing judgments over the fate of the entire universe and calmly receiving sacrificial offerings filled with blood and incense. Do you see it? Through those crowded cuneiform marks, the Sumerians are trying to tell us how their world truly operated. They were not patiently writing a maritime logbook or a physics report about strangers riding smoke-belching flying machines across the sky. What they were establishing was supreme authority, an unchanging order of all things. That is exactly why, in their greatest text, the Sumerian King List, they did not write that technology was distributed from spacecraft. They carved a clearly religious declaration: kingship descended from heaven. And there, the three supreme figures, Anu, Enlil, and Enki, are never described as commanders running a base. They always sit enthroned at the highest point of a divine chain of command, eternally governing the fate of humanity. In other words, the words carved into clay are not neutral. They are sacred. And every modern attempt to dress the Anunnaki in astronaut suits runs into one basic truth: the ancients classified these beings within the divine realm. The second point of disagreement lies in the nature of the gifts the Anunnaki brought. Think logically. If the Anunnaki were only an interplanetary mining corporation, we would expect the clay tablets to record practical things: mining directives, gold quotas, lists of drilling tools, or geological maps. Instead, what the Anunnaki left behind was the operating system of an entire civilization. They gave humanity cuneiform writing and the base 60 counting system, the sexagesimal system, a mathematical system, perfectly suited for handling fractions, measuring angles, and measuring time, which still shapes our clocks and our 360-degree circles today. They gave astronomical knowledge to synchronize agricultural and ritual calendars, such as the Venus tablet of Amisaduqa, with its astonishing precision. They taught irrigation how to dig canals, and most importantly, they gave law and kingship. That was the core software that kept human society from falling into chaos. More than that, the personalities of the Anunnaki are not flat, like construction site supervisors. Enlil appears with majesty, judgment, and the wrath that brings the flood. Meanwhile, Enki is the embodiment of water protection and the savior of humanity. That is the complex moral and psychological profile of gods. They have the power to judge, the capacity for mercy, and the authority to bestow blessings. Teaching humans to use a tool is the work of a mechanic. But teaching humans law, morality, and how to operate an empire belongs to the role of a creator. And that founding role is not limited to Mesopotamia. When we zoom out to the global map, one core function begins to repeat everywhere. The names are different, but the job description is exactly the same. In Egypt, Thoth gives human beings hieroglyphs and the system of law. In Central America, the gods in the Popol Vuh grant language and calendar order. In Africa, the Namo descend from Sirius to teach the Dogon tribe agriculture. In the North American desert, the Hopi and Zuni portray the Kachina as teachers bringing instructions for survival. Even on the cliffs of Val Camonica or inside the Lascaux caves of Europe, those non-human teachers also appear in luminous or hybrid forms. What is astonishing here is not that they wear the same kind of clothing or ride the same style of flying saucer. What is astonishing lies in their function. If these were only extraterrestrial mining crews landing at random, we would see chaos in their goals, mixed moralities, and disconnected techniques on each continent. But no. What we actually see in every isolated culture is the origin of order. The beings from heaven always bring the most foundational tools of communal life: language, calendars, laws, and morality. That consistency explains a deep psychological truth about humanity. When great knowledge appears and completely changes the way we understand time, truth, and authority, ancient people do not remember it like an instruction manual for machinery. They sanctify it. They retell it as a descent from above, because in the ancient worldview, heaven was the only place worthy of containing supreme authority. Across the world, humanity has retold one shared role, the role of creators. Finally, the steel evidence that breaks apart the extraterrestrials' mining gold hypothesis is not found in the stories. It is found in the way humanity has acted for thousands of years. What did human beings actually do with the memories of the Anunnaki? If we were only slaves exploited by strangers, then when that practical relationship ended, the remaining records would be full of gold delivery receipts, transportation logistics, and then everything would sink into forgetfulness. But humanity did not do that. We built enormous ziggurats, not as mines, but as axes connecting heaven and earth. We established priestly classes, maintained festival calendars, and crowned kings under the witness of the heavenly realm. In the great library of King Ashurbanipal, tens of thousands of clay tablets did not record the technical specifications of spacecraft. They recorded the Enuma Elish Epic Omen System's laws and hymns. The pilgrims were still there. The calendars were still there. Oaths in Mesopotamian courts were still sworn in the name of the gods. Human beings organized their entire life cycle around these beings. That is how human beings respond when standing before the sacred realm, not when standing before a construction site foreman. This does not mean curiosity about extraterrestrial life is foolish, nor does it forbid us from proposing bold hypotheses. But when we stand before tens of thousands of clay tablets, before towering temples, and before the flow of history, the most honest conclusion is to follow the direction in which the evidence points. The Sumerians, like other great civilizations, never remembered the beings who brought them law, calendars, and language as extraterrestrials. They remembered and worshipped those beings as gods. They were beings who held authority and existential meaning powers that shaped the very concept of civilization for us. So if we must offer a final answer, let us choose the way the clay tablets did. Let us call the Anunnaki by the exact name the first witnesses used for them. In the world of the Sumerians, in their language, and in the way they built their entire lives around that memory, the Anunnaki were not accidental visitors passing through. They were the gods, and that perhaps is the greatest secret, hidden right before our eyes. We have come a very long way. We have debated, compared, and questioned the deepest hidden corners of history. And yet, to truly understand the Anunnaki, every modern interpretation becomes dim if we ignore the voices of the first witnesses themselves. Nothing reflects the truth more clearly than the marks the ancients personally carved into clay. What you are about to hear is not speculative theory, nor is it a story embroidered in the 21st century. These are the most ancient and original records of humanity, heroic epics, king lists, and hymns that shape the entire memory of Mesopotamia. Before we begin, please note all content and excerpts from ancient texts in this video have been translated, adapted, and analyzed by us for educational and academic historical research purposes, in accordance with the principle of fair use. The script and method of presentation are the exclusive intellectual property of this channel. Please respect copyright and do not re-upload this content in any form. Now let your mind become still and listen carefully. This is no longer my voice. This is the voice of the world's first civilization, an echo returning from 4,000 years ago. The Atrahasis Epic. Atrahasis Epic. When the gods, instead of man, did the work, bore the loads. The gods' load was too great, the work too hard, the punishment too much. The great Anunnaki made the Igigi, evil-minded ones, carry the workload sevenfold. Anu, their father, was king, their counselor warrior. Enlil, their chamberlain, was Ninurta, their canal controller, and Nugi. They took the box of lots, cast the lots. The gods made the division. Anu went up to the sky, and Enlil took the earth for his people. The bolt which bars the sea was assigned to far-sighted Enki. When Anu had gone up to the sky, and the gods of the Apsu had gone below, the Anunnaki of the sky made the Igigi, evil-minded ones, bear the workload. The gods had to dig out canals, had to clear channels, the lifelines of the land. The gods dug out the Tigris River, and then dug out the Euphrates. In the deep they set up the Apsu of the land. Inside it, raised its top. Of all the mountains, they were counting the years of loads. the great marsh. They were counting the years of loads. For 3,600 years, they bore the excess hard work night and day. They groaned and blamed each other, grumbled over the masses of excavated soil. Let us confront our warden and get him to relieve us of our hard work. Come, let us carry the Lord, the guard of the prisoner gods, the warrior, from his dwelling. Then Kingu made his voice heard and spoke to the gods, his brothers. Come, let us carry the guard of the prisoner gods, the warrior, from his dwelling. Come, let us carry Elil, the guard of the prisoner gods, the warrior, from his dwelling. Now cry battle, let us mix fight with battle. The gods listened to his speech. Set fire to their tools, put aside their spades for fire, their loads for the fire god. They flared up. When they reached the gate of warrior Elil's dwelling, it was night. The middle watch Eker was surrounded. Elil had not realized. Yet Kalkal was attentive and had it closed. He held the lock and watched the gate. Kalkal roused Nusku. They listened to the noise of the Igigi. Then Nusku roused his master, made him get out of bed. My lord, your house is surrounded. A rabble is running around your door. Elil, your house is surrounded. A rabble is running around your door. Elil had weapons brought to his dwelling. Elil made his voice heard and spoke to the vizier. Nusku, bar your door. Take up your weapons and stand in front of me. Nusku barred his door, took up his weapons, and stood in front of Elil. Nusku made his voice heard and spoke to the warrior Ali. Oh, my lord, your face is sallow as tamarisk. Why do you fear your own sons? O Elil, your face is sallow as tamarisk. Why do you fear your own son? Send for Anu to be brought down to you. Have Enki fetched into your presence. He sent for Anu to be brought down to him. Enki was fetched into his presence. Anu, king of the sky, was present. Enki, king of the Apsu, attended. The great Anunnaki were present. Elil got up, and the case was put. Elil made his voice heard and spoke to the great gods. Is it against me that they have risen? Shall I do battle? What did I see with my own eyes? A rabble was running around my door. Anu made his voice heard and spoke to the warrior. Elil, let Nusku go out and find out the word of the Igigi, who have surrounded your door, a command. 2. Elil made his voice heard and spoke to the vizier. Nusku, open your door. Take up your weapons and stand before me in the assembly of all the gods. Bow, then stand and tell them. Your father, Anu, your guard warrior Elil, your warden Ninurta, and your canal controller, Enugji, have sent me to say who is in charge of the rabble, who is in charge of the fighting, who declared war, who ran to the door of Elil. Nusku opened his door, took up his weapons, went from Elil. In the assembly of all the gods, he bowed, then stood and told the message. Your father Anu, your guard warrior Elil, your warden Ninurta, and your canal controller, Enugji, have sent me to say who is in charge of the rabble, who is in charge of the fighting, who declared war, who ran to the door of Elil. Every single one of us declared war. We have put a stop to the digging. The load is excessive. It is killing us. Our work is too hard, the trouble too much. So every single one of us gods has agreed to complain to Eli Nusku, took his weapons, went and returned to Elil. My lord, you sent me to... I went. I explained. Saying every single one of us gods declared war. We have put a stop to the digging. The load is excessive. It is killing us. Our work is too hard, the trouble too much. So every single one of us gods has agreed to complain to Elil. Elil listened to that speech. His tears flowed. Elil spoke guardedly, addressed the warrior. Anu, noble one, take a decree with you to the sky. Show your strength while the Anunnaki are sitting before you. Call up one god and let them cast him for destruction. Anu made his voice heard and spoke to the gods, his brothers. What are we complaining of? Their work was indeed too hard. Their punishment was too much. Every day, the earth resounded. The warning signal was loud enough, we kept hearing the noise. Do tasks while the Anunnaki are sitting before you, and while Belet-Ili, the womb goddess, is present, call up one and cast him for destruction. Anu made his voice heard and spoke to Nusku. Nusku, open your door, take up your weapons, bow in the assembly of the great gods, then stand and tell them, your father, Anu, your guard warrior, Enlil, your warden Ninurta, and your canal controller, Ennugi, have sent me to say who is in charge of the rabble, who will be in charge of battle, which God started the war. A rabble was running around my door. When Nusku heard this, he took up his weapons, bowed in the assembly of the great gods, then stood and told them, your father Anu, your guard warrior Enlil, your warden Ninurta, and your canal controller, Ennugi, have sent me to say who is in charge of the rabble, who is in charge of the fighting, which God started the war. A rabble was running around Enlil's door. Ea made his voice heard and spoke to the gods, his brothers. Why are we blaming them? Their work was too hard. Their punishment was too much. Every day the earth resounded. The warning signal was loud enough, we kept hearing the noise. There is Belet-Ili, the womb goddess, is present. Let her create a mortal man, so that he may bear the yoke. So that he may bear the yoke, the work of Enlil. Let man bear the load of the gods. Belet-Ili, the womb goddess, is present. Let the womb goddess create offspring, and let them bear the load of the god. They called up the goddess, asked, the midwife of the gods, wise mommy, you are the womb goddess, to be the creator of mankind. Create a mortal that he may bear the yoke. Let him bear the yoke, the work of Enlil. Let him bear the load of the prisoner gods. Nintu made her voice heard and spoke to the great gods. On the 1st, 7th, and 15th of the month, I shall make a purification by washing. Then one god should be slaughtered, and the gods can be purified by immersion. Nintu shall mix the clay with his flesh and blood. Then a god and a man will be mixed together in clay. Let us hear the drum beat forever after. Let a ghost come into existence from the god's flesh. Let her proclaim it as her living sign, and let the ghost exist so as not to forget the slain god. They answered yes in the assembly. The great Anunnaki who assigned the fates. On the 1st, 7th, and 15th of the month, he made a purification by washing. Geshtu-E, a god who had intelligence, they slaughtered in their assembly. Nintu mixed clay with his flesh and blood. They heard the drumbeat forever after. A ghost came into existence from the god's flesh, and she proclaimed it as his living sign. The ghost existed so as not to forget the slain god. After she had mixed that clay, she called up the Anunnaki, the great gods. The Igigi, the great prisoner gods, spat spittle upon the clay. Mami made her voice heard and spoke to the great gods. I have carried out perfectly the work that you ordered of me. You have slaughtered a god together with his intelligence. I have relieved you of your hard work. I have imposed your load on man. You have bestowed noise on man. You have bestowed noise on mankind. I have undone the chains of imprisonment and granted freedom. They listened to the speech of hers and were freed from anxiety and kissed her feet. We used to call you Mommy, but now your name shall be Mistress of all gods. Far-sighted Enki and wise Mami went into the room of fate. The womb goddesses were assembled. He trod the clay in her presence. She kept reciting an incantation, for Enki, staying in her presence, made her recite it. When she had finished her incantation, she pinched off 14 pieces of clay and set 7 pieces on the right, 7 on the left. Between them, she put down a mud brick. She made use of a reed, opened it to cut the umbilical cord, called up the wise and knowledgeable womb goddesses, 7 and 7. 7 created males, 7 created females. For the womb goddess is creator of fate. He, them two by two in her presence. Mommy made these rules for people. In the house of a woman who is giving birth, the mud brick shall be put down for 7 days. Belet Ili wise mommy shall be honored. The midwife shall rejoice in the house of the woman who gives birth. And when the woman gives birth to the baby, the mother of the baby shall sever herself. A man to a girl. Her bosom, a beard can be seen on a young man's cheek. In gardens and waysides, a wife and her husband choose each other. The womb goddesses were assembled, and Nintu was present. They counted the months, called up the 10th month as the term of fates. When the 10th month came, she slipped in a staff and opened the womb. Her face was glad and joyful. She covered her head, performed the midwifery, put on her belt, said a blessing. She made a drawing in flour and put down a mud brick I myself created. It my hands made it. The midwife shall rejoice in the house of the Kadistu priestess. Whenever a woman gives birth and the baby's mother severs herself, the mud brick shall be put down for 9 days. Nintu the womb goddess shall be honored. She shall call their mommy. The womb goddess, lay down the linen cloth. When the bed is laid out in their house, a wife and her husband shall choose each other. Inanna shall rejoice in the wife-husband relationship in the father-in-law's house. Celebration shall last for 9 days, and they shall call Inanna Ishara. On the 15th day, the fixed time of fate she shall call. A man, the son to his father. They saddened. He was carrying, he saw, Elil. They took hold of, made new picks and spades, made big canals to feed people and sustain the gods. 600 years less than 600 passed, and the country was as noisy as a bellowing bull. The god grew restless at their racket. Elul had to listen to their noise. He addressed the great gods. The noise of mankind has become too much. I am losing sleep over their racket. Give the order that Surapu disease shall break out. Now there was one Atrahasis whose ear was open to his god Enki. He would speak with his god, and his god would speak with him. Atrahasis made his voice heard and spoke to his lord. How long will the gods make us suffer? Will they make us suffer illness forever? Enki made his voice heard and spoke to his servant. Call the elders, the senior men. Start an uprising in your own house. Let the heralds proclaim. Let them make a loud noise in the land. Do not revere your gods, do not pray to your goddesses, but search out the door of Namtara. Bring his baked loaf into his presence. May the flour offerings reach him. May he be shamed by the presence and wipe away his hand. Atrahasis took the order, gathered the elders to his door. Atrahasis made his voice heard and spoke to the elders. I have called the elders, the senior men. Start an uprising in your own house. Let the heralds proclaim. Let them make a loud noise in the land. Do not revere your gods. Do not pray to your goddesses, but search out the door of Namtara. Bring his baked loaf into his presence. May the flour offerings reach him. May he be shamed by the presence and wipe away his hand. The elders listened to his speech. They built a temple for Namtara in the city. Heralds proclaimed. They made a loud noise in the land. They did not revere their god. They did not pray to their goddess, but searched out the door of Namtara. Brought a baked loaf into his presence. The flour offerings reached him, and he was shamed by the presence and wiped away his hand. The Surupu disease left them. The gods went back to their regular offerings. Enuma Elish, the 7 tablets of creation. The first tablet, when in the height heaven was not named, and the earth beneath did not yet bear a name, and the primeval Apsu who begat them, and Chaos Tiamut the mother of them both. Their waters were mingled together, and no field was formed, no marsh was to be seen. When of the gods, none had been called into being, and none bore a name, and no destinies were ordained. Then were created the gods. In the midst of heaven, Lamu and Lahamu were called into being. Ages increased. Then Ansar and Kisar were created, and over them. Long were the days, then there came forth Anu their son, Ansar and Anu, and the god Anu, Nudimud, whom his fathers his begetters, abounding in all wisdom. He was exceeding strong. He had no rival. Thus were established and were the great gods. But Tiamat and Apsu were still in confusion. They were troubled and in disorder. Apru was not diminished in might, and Tiamat roared. She smote in their deeds. Their way was evil. Then Apsu, the begetter of the great gods, cried unto Mumu his minister, and said unto him, O Mumu, thou minister that rejoicest my spirit, come unto Tiamut, let us go. So they went, and before Tiamat they lay down. They consulted on a plan, with regard to the gods their sons. Apsu opened his mouth and spake. And unto Tiamut, the glistening one, he addressed the word, their way. By day I cannot rest by night, I cannot lie down in peace. But I will destroy their way, I will. Let there be lamentation, and let us lie down again in peace. When Tiamat heard these words, she raged and cried aloud. She, grievously, she uttered a curse, and unto Apsu she spake, What then shall we do? Let their way be made difficult, and let us lie down again in peace. Mumu answered and gave counsel unto Apsu, and hostile to the gods was the counsel Mumu gave. Come, their way is strong, but thou shalt destroy it. Then by day shalt thou have rest, by night shalt thou lie down in peace. Apsu hearkened unto him, and his countenance grew bright, since he Mumu planned evil against the gods his sons. He was afraid. His knees became weak. They gave way beneath him because of the evil which their firstborn had planned. There they altered. Lamentation, they sat in sorrow. Then Ea, who knoweth all that is, went up, and he beheld their muttering. He spake, He hath conquered, and he weepeth and sitteth in tribulation. Of fear, we shall not lie down in peace. Apsu is laid waste, and Mumu, who were taken captive in, thou didst. Let us lie down in peace. They will smite. Let us lie down in peace. Thou shalt take vengeance for them. Unto the tempest shalt thou. And Tiamat hearkened unto the word of the bright God, and said, Shalt thou entrust, let us wage war. The gods in the midst of. For the gods did she create. They banded themselves together, and at the side of Tiamat they advanced. They were furious. They devised mischief without resting night and day. They prepared for battle, fuming and raging. They joined their forces and made war. Hubur, Tiamat, who formed all things, made in addition weapons invincible. She spawned monster serpents, sharp of tooth and merciless of fang. With poison instead of blood, she filled their bodies. Fierce monster vipers she clothed with terror. With splendor she decked them, she made them of lofty stature. Whoever beheld them, terror overcame him. Their bodies reared up, and none could withstand their attack. She set up vipers and dragons, and the monster Lahamu, and hurricanes and raging hounds, and scorpion men, and mighty tempests, and fishmen and rams. They bore cruel weapons without fear of the fight. Her commands were mighty, none could resist them. After this fashion huge of stature, she made 11 kinds of monsters. Among the gods, who were her sons, inasmuch as he had given her support, she exalted Kingu. In their midst, she raised him to power, to march before the forces, to lead the host, to give the battle signal to advance to the attack, to direct the battle, to control the fight. Unto him she entrusted. In costly raiment she made him sit, saying, I have uttered thy spell in the assembly of the gods, I have raised thee to power. The dominion over all the gods have I entrusted unto him. Be thou exalted, thou my chosen spouse. May they magnify thy name over all of them, the Anunnaki. She gave him the tablets of destiny on his breast. She laid them, saying, Thy command shall not be without avail, and the word of thy mouth shall be established. Now Kingu, thus exalted, having received the power of Anu, decreed the fate among the gods, his son saying, Let the opening of your mouth quench the fire god. Whoso is exalted in the battle, let him display his might. The second tablet. Tiamat made weighty her handiwork, evil she wrought against the gods, her children. To avenge Apsu, Tiamat planned evil. But how she had collected her forces, the god unto Ea divulged. Hearken to this thing. And he was grievously afflicted, and he sat in sorrow. The days went by, and his anger was appeased, and to the place of Ansar, his father, he took his way. He went, and standing before Ansar, the father who begat him, all that Tiamat had plotted, he repeated unto him, saying, Tiamat, our mother, hath conceived a hatred for us. With all her force she rageth full of wrath. All the gods have turned to her. With those whom ye created, they've go at her side. They are banded together, and at the side of Tiamat they advance. They are furious, they devise mischief without resting night and day. They prepare for battle, fuming and raging. They have joined their forces and are making war. Hubur, who formed all things, hath made in addition weapons invincible. She hath spawned monster serpents, sharp of tooth and merciless of fang. With poison instead of blood, she hath filled their bodies. Fierce monster vipers she hath clothed with terror, with splendor she hath decked them. She hath made them of lofty stature. Whoever beholdeth them is overcome by terror. Their bodies rear up, and none can withstand their attack. She hath set up vipers and dragons, and the monster Lahamu, and hurricanes, and raging hounds, and scorpion men, and mighty tempests, and fishmen, and rams. They bear cruel weapons without fear of the fight. Her commands are mighty. None can resist them. After this fashion huge of stature hath she made 11 monsters. Among the gods, who are her sons, inasmuch as he hath given her support, she hath exalted Kingu. In their midst she hath raised him to power, to march before the forces, to lead the host, to give the battle signal, to advance to the attack, to direct the battle, to control the fight. Unto him hath she entrusted. In costly raiment she hath made him sit, saving. I have uttered thy spell. In the assembly of the gods I have raised thee to power. The dominion over all the gods have I entrusted unto thee. Be thou exalted, thou my chosen spouse. May they magnify thy name over all of them. She hath given him the tablets of destiny on his breast. She laid them, saying, Thy command shall not be without avail, and the word of thy mouth shall be established. Now Kingu, thus exalted, having received the power of Anu, decreed the fate for the gods, her sons, saying, Let the opening of your mouth quench the fire god. Whoso is exalted in the battle, let him display his might. When Ansar heard how Tiamat was mightily in revolt, he bit his lips. His mind was not at peace. He made a bitter lamentation. Battle. Thou, Mumu and Apsu, thou hast smitten. But Tiamat hath exalted Kingu, and where is one who can oppose her? Deliberation. Of the gods Nudimud. A gap of about a dozen lines occurs here. Ansar unto his son addressed the word, My mighty hero, whose strength is great, and whose onslaught cannot be withstood. Go and stand before Tiamat, that her spirit may be appeased, that her heart may be merciful. But if she will not hearken unto thy word, our word shalt thou speak unto her, that she may be pacified. He heard the word of his father Ansar, and he directed his path to her. Toward her he took the way. And drew nigh, he beheld the muttering of Tiamat, but he could not withstand her, and he turned back. Ansar, he spake unto him. A gap of over 20 lines occurs here. An avenger, valiant, in the place of his decision. He spake unto him, Thy father, thou art my son, who maketh merciful his heart. To the battle shalt thou draw nigh, he that shall behold thee shall have peace. And the Lord rejoiced at the word of his father. And he drew nigh and stood before Ansar. Ansar beheld him, and his heart was filled with joy. He kissed him on the lips, and his fear departed from him. O my father, let not the word of thy lips be overcome. Let me go, that I may accomplish all that is in thy heart. O Ansar, let not the word of thy lips be overcome. Let me go, that I may accomplish all that is in thy heart. What man is it who hath brought thee forth to battle? Tiamat, who is a woman, is armed and attacketh thee. Rejoice and be glad. The neck of Tiamat shalt thou swiftly trample under foot. Rejoice and be glad. The neck of Tiamat shalt thou swiftly trample under foot. Zero, my son, who knoweth all wisdom, pacify Tiamat with thy pure incantation. Speedily set out upon thy way, for thy blood shall not be poured out. Thou shalt return again. The Lord rejoiced at the word of his father. His heart exulted, and unto his father he spake. O Lord of the gods, destiny of the great gods, if I, your avenger, conquer Tiamat and give you life, appoint an assembly, make my fate preeminent, and proclaim it. In Upsukanaku seat yourself joyfully together. With my word in place of you will I decree fate. May whatsoever I do remain unaltered. May the word of my lips never be chanced, nor made of no avail. The third tablet. Ansar opened his mouth, and unto Gaga his minister spake the word. O Gaga, thou minister that rejoicest my spirit, unto Lahmu, and Lahamu will I send thee. Thou canst attain, thou shalt cause to be brought before thee. Let the gods, all of them, make ready for a feast at a banquet. Let them sit, let them eat bread, let them mix wine, that for Marduk, their avenger, they may decree the fate. Go, Gaga, stand before them. And all that I tell thee repeat unto them, and say, Ansar Vorson hath sent me. The purpose of his heart he hath made known unto me. The purpose of his heart he hath made known unto me. He saith that Tiamat, our mother, hath conceived a hatred for us. With all her force she rageth full of wrath. All the gods have turned to her. With those whom ye created, they go at her side. They are banded together, and at the side of Tiamat they advance. They are furious. They devise mischief without resting night and day. They prepare for battle fuming and raging. They have joined their forces and are making war. Umuhubur, who formed all things, hath made in addition weapons invincible. She hath spawned monster serpents, sharp of tooth and merciless of fang. With poison instead of blood, she hath filled their bodies. Fierce monster vipers she hath clothed with terror. With splendor she hath decked them. She hath made them of lofty stature. Whoever beboldeth them, terror overcometh him. Their bodies rear up, and none can withstand their attack. She hath set up vipers and dragons, and the monster Lahamu, and hurricanes and raging bounds, and scorpion men, and mighty tempests, and fishmen and rams. They bear merciless weapons without fear of the fight. Her commands are Miati. None can resist them. After this fashion huge of stature hath she made 11 monsters. Among the gods who are her sons, inasmuch as he hath given her support, she hath exalted Kingu. In their midst she hath raised him to power, to march before the forces to lead the host. to give the battle signal to advance to the attack, to direct the battle to control the fight. Unto him hath she entrusted. In costly raiment she hath made him sit, saying, I have uttered thy spell. In the assembly of the gods I have raised thee to power. The dominion over all the gods have I entrusted unto thee. Be thou exalted, thou my chosen spouse. May they magnify thy name over all of them. The Anunnaki, she hath given him the tablets of destiny, on his breast she laid them, saying, Thy command shall not be without avail, and the word of thy mouth shall be established. Now Kingu, thus exalted, having received the power of Anu, decreed the fate for the gods, her son saving. Let the opening of your mouth quench the fire god. Whoso is exalted in the battle, let him display his might. I sent Anu, but he could not withstand her. Nudimmud was afraid and turned back. But Marduk hath set out the director of the gods, your son, to set out against Tiamat. His heart hath prompted him. He opened his mouth and spake unto me, saying, If I, your avenger, conquer Tiamat and give you life, appoint an assembly. Make my fate preeminent and proclaim it. In Upsukinaku seat yourself joyfully together. With my word in place of you will I decree fate. May whatsoever I do remain unaltered. May the word of my lips never be changed, nor made of no avail. Hasten therefore and swiftly decree for him the fate which you bestow, that he may go and fight your strong enemy. Gaga went, he took his way, and humbly, before Lahmu and Lahamu the gods, his fathers, he made obeisance, and he kissed the ground at their feet. He humbled himself. Then he stood up and spake unto them, saying, Ansar your son hath sent me. The purpose of his heart he hath made known unto me. He saith that Tiamat, our mother, hath conceived a hatred for us. With all her force she rageth full of wrath. All the gods have turned to her, with those whom ye created, they go at her side. They are banded together, and at the side of Tiamat they advance. They are furious, they devise mischief without resting night and day. They prepare for battle fuming and raging. They have joined their forces and are making war. Hubur, who formed all things, hath made in addition weapons invincible. She hath spawned monster serpents, sharp of tooth and merciless of fang. With poison instead of blood, she hath filled their bodies. Fierce monster vipers she hath clothed with terror. With splendor she hath decked them, she hath made them of lofty stature. Whoever beboldeth them, terror overcometh him. Their bodies rear up, and none can withstand their attack. She hath set up vipers and dragons, and the monster Lahamu, and hurricanes and raging hounds and scorpion men, and mighty tempests and fishmen and rams. They bear merciless weapons without fear of the fight. Her commands are mighty. None can resist them. After this fashion huge of stature hath she made 11 monsters. Among the gods who are her sons, inasmuch as he hath given her support, she hath exalted Kingu. In their midst she hath raised him to power. To march before the forces, to lead the host, to give the battle signal to advance to the attack, to direct the battle, to control the fight. Unto him hath she entrusted. In costly of raiment she hath made him sit saving. I have uttered thy spell. In the assembly of the gods I have raised thee to power. The dominion over all the gods have I entrusted unto thee. Be thou exalted, thou my chosen spouse. May they magnify thy name over all of them. The Anunnaki. She hath given him the tablets of destiny, on his breast she laid them, saving. Thy command shall not be without avail, and the word of thy mouth shall be established. Now Kingu, thus exalted, having received the power of Anu, decreed the fate for the gods, her son, saying, Let the opening of your mouth quench the fire god. Whoso is exalted in the battle, let him display his might. I sent Anu, but he could not withstand her. Nudimmud was afraid and turned back. But Marduk hath set out the director of the gods your son. To set out against Tiamat, his heart hath prompted him. He opened his mouth and spake unto me, saying, If I, your avenger, conquer Tiamat and give you life, appoint an assembly, make my fate preeminent, and proclaim it. In Upsukinaku seat yourselves joyfully together. With my word in place of you will I decree fate. May whatsoever I do remain unaltered. May the word of my lips never be changed, nor made of no avail. Hasten therefore and swiftly decree for him the fate which you bestow, that he may go and fight your strong enemy Lahmu. And Lahamu heard and cried aloud. All of the Igigi, the elder gods wailed bitterly, saying, What has been altered so that they should? We do not understand the deed of Tiamat. Then did they collect and go, the great gods, all of them, who decree fate. They entered in before Ansar, they filled. They kissed one another in the assembly. They made ready for the feast at the banquet they sat. They ate bread, they mixed sesame wine. The sweet drink the mead confused there. They were drunk with drinking, their bodies were filled. They were wholly at ease, their spirit was exalted. Then for Marduk, their avenger, did they decree the fate. The fourth tablet, they prepared for him a lordly chamber. Before his fathers as prince he took his place. Thou art chiefest among the great gods, thy fate is unequaled, thy word is Anu. O Marduk, thou art chiefest among the great gods, thy fate is unequaled, thy word is Anu. Henceforth not without avail shall be thy command, in thy power shall it be to exalt and to abase. Established shall be the word of thy mouth, irresistible shall be thy command. None among the gods shall transgress thy boundary. Abundance, the desire of the shrines of the gods, shall be established in thy sanctuary, even though they lack offerings. O Marduk, thou art our avenger. We give thee sovereignty over the whole world. Sit thou down in might, be exalted in thy command. Thy weapon shall never lose its power, it shall crush thy foe. O Lord, spare the life of him that putteth his trust in thee. But as for the God who began the rebellion, pour out his life. Then set they in their midst a garment, and unto Marduk, their firstborn, they spake. May thy fate, O Lord, be supreme among the gods, to destroy and to create. Speak thou the word, and thy command shall be fulfilled. Command now, and let the garment vanish. And speak the word again, and let the garment reappear. Then he spake with his mouth, and the garment vanished. Again he commanded it, and the garment reappeared. When the gods, his fathers, beheld the fulfillment of his word, they rejoiced, and they did homage unto him, saying, Marduk is king. They bestowed upon him the scepter, and the throne, and the ring. They give him an invincible weapony, which overwhelmeth the foe. Go and cut off the life of Tiamat, and let the wind carry her blood into secret places. After the gods, his fathers, had decreed for the Lord his fate, they caused him to set out on a path of prosperity and success. He made ready the bow, he chose his weapon, he slung a spear upon him and fastened it. He raised the club in his right hand, he grasped it. The bow and the quiver he hung at his side. He set the lightning in front of him. With burning flame he filled his body. He made a net to enclose the inward parts of Tiamat. The four winds he stationed, so that nothing of her might escape. The south wind and the north wind and the east wind and the west wind. He brought near to the net the gift of his father Anu. He created the evil wind and the tempest and the hurricane and the fourfold wind and the sevenfold wind and the whirlwind and the wind, which had no equal. He sent forth the winds which he had created, the seven of them. To disturb the inward parts of Tiamat, they followed after him. Then the Lord raised the thunderbolt, his mighty weapon. He mounted the chariot, the storm unequaled for terror. He harnessed and yoked unto it 4 horses, destructive, ferocious, overwhelming, and swift of pace. Were their teeth, they were flecked with foam. They were skilled in. They had been trained to trample underfoot, mighty in battle left and right. His garment was, he was clothed with terror. With overpowering brightness, his head was crowned. Then he set out, he took his way, and toward the raging Tiamat he set his face. On his lips he grasped in his hand. Then they beheld him. The gods beheld him. The gods, his fathers, beheld him. The gods beheld him. And the Lord drew nigh, he gazed upon the inward parts of Tiamat. He perceived the muttering of Kingu, her spouse. As Marduk gazed, Kingu was troubled in his gait. His will was destroyed, and his motion ceased. And the gods, his helpers who marched by his side, beheld their leaders, and their sight was troubled. But Tiamat, she turned not her neck. With lips that failed not, she uttered rebellious words. Thy coming as Lord of the gods, from their places have they gathered, in thy place are they. Then the Lord raised the thunderbolt, his mighty weapon, and against Tiamat, who was raging thus, he sent the word. Thou art become great, thou hast exalted thyself on high, and thy heart hath prompted thee to call to battle. Their fathers, thou hatest. Thou hast exalted Kingu to be thy spouse. Thou hast him that even as Anu he should issue Deiries. Thou hast followed after evil, and against the gods my fathers thou hast contrived thy wicked plan. Let then thy host be equipped, let thy weapons be girded on. Stand I, and thou let us join battle. When Tiamat heard these words, she was like one possessed. She lost her reason. Tiamat uttered wild, piercing cries. She trembled and shook to her very foundations. She recited an incantation, she pronounced her spell, and the gods of the battle cried out for their weapons. Then advanced Tiamat and Marduk, the counselor of the gods. To the fight they came on, to the battle they drew nigh. The Lord spread out his net and caught her, and the evil wind that was behind him he let loose in her face. As Tiamat opened her mouth to its full extent, he drove in the evil wind, while as yet she had not shut her lips. The terrible winds filled her belly, and her courage was taken from her, and her mouth she opened wide. He seized the spear and burst her belly. He severed her inward parts. He pierced her heart. He overcame her and cut off her life. He cast down her body and stood upon it. When he had slain Tiamat, the leader, her might was broken, her host was scattered, and the gods, her helpers who marched by her side, trembled and were afraid and turned back. They took to flight to save their lives, but they were surrounded so that they could not escape. He took them captive, he broke their weapons. In the net they were caught, and in the snare they sat down. Of the world they filled with cries of grief. They received punishment from him, they were held in bondage. And on the 11 creatures which she had filled with the power of striking terror, upon the troop of devils who marched at her, he brought affliction, their strength he. Them and their opposition he trampled under his feet. Moreover, Kingu, who had been exalted over them, he conquered, and with the god Duguga he counted him. He took from him the tablets of destiny that were not rightly his. He sealed them with a seal, and in his own breast he laid them. Now, after the hero Marduk had conquered and cast down his enemies, and had made the arrogant foe even like, and had fully established Ansar's triumph over the enemy, and had attained the purpose of Nudimud. Over the captive gods he strengthened his durance, and unto Tiamat, whom he had conquered, he returned. And the Lord stood upon Tiamat's hinder parts, and with his merciless club he smashed her skull. He cut through the channels of her blood, and he made the north wind bear it away into secret places. His fathers beheld, and they rejoiced and were glad. Presents and gifts they brought unto him. Then the Lord rested, gazing upon her dead body, while he divided the flesh and devised a cunning plan. He split her up like a flat fish into two halves. One half of her he established as a covering for heaven. He fixed a bolt, he stationed a watchman, and bade them not to let her waters come forth. He passed through the heavens, he surveyed the regions thereof. And over against the deep he set the dwelling of Nudimud. And the Lord measured the structure of the deep, and he founded Isara, a mansion like unto it. The mansion Isara, which he created as heaven, he caused Anubel and Ea in their districts to inhabit. The fifth tablet, he Marduk made the stations for the great gods. The stars their images as the stars of the zodiac he fixed. He ordained the year, and into sections he divided it. For the 12 months he fixed 3 stars. After he had the days of the year, images, he founded the station of Nibiru, the planet Jupiter, to determine their bounds, that none might err or go astray. He set the station of Bel and Ea along with him. He opened great gates on both sides. He made strong the bolt on the left and on the right. In the midst thereof he fixed the zenith. The moon god he caused to shine forth the night he entrusted to him. He appointed him a being of the night to determine the days. Every month without ceasing with the crown, he covered him, saying, At the beginning of the month, when thou shinest upon the land, thou commandest the horns to determine 6 days. And on the 7th day, to divide the crown. On the 14th day, thou shalt stand opposite the half. When the sun god on the foundation of heaven, thou shalt cause to, and thou shalt make his. Unto the path of the sun god shalt thou cause to draw nigh, and on the day thou shalt stand opposite, and the sun god shall, to traverse her way. Thou shalt cause to draw nigh, and thou shalt judge the right, to destroy. Nearly 50 lines are here lost. The gods, his fathers, looked upon the net that he had made. They looked upon the bow, and saw how its work had been completed. They praised the work he had done. Then Anu raised the bow in the assembly of the gods. He kissed the bow, saying, It is, and so he named the names of the bow, saying, Longwood shall be one name, and the second name shall be, and its third name shall be the bow star. In heaven it shall. Then he fixed a station for it. Now after the fate of, he set a throne in heaven. The remainder of this tablet is missing. The 6th tablet. When Marduk heard the words of the gods, his heart moved him, and he devised a cunning plan. He opened his mouth and spoke to Ea. What he had conceived in his heart, he shared with him. I will take my blood and shape bone. I will make mankind so that mankind may. I will create mankind to inhabit the earth, so that the service of the gods may be established and their shrines may be built. But I will change the ways of the gods, and I will alter their paths. Together they shall be oppressed, and to evil they shall. And he answered him and spoke these words. Of the gods I have changed, and one shall be destroyed, and mankind I will, and the gods. And the rest of the text is missing, except for the final few lines of the tablet, which read as follows. They rejoiced. In Upsukin Naku they established their dwelling. Of the heroic son, their avenger, they cried. We whom he rescued. They seated themselves, and in the assembly they named him. They all cried aloud, and they exalted him. The 7th tablet. O Asari Marduk, bestower of planting, founder of sowing, creator of grain and plants, the one who caused the green herb to spring up. O Asaru Ali Marduk, the one revered in the house of counsel, the one abundant in counsel. The gods paid homage, and fear took hold of them. O Asaru Alim Nuna Marduk, the mighty one, the light of the Father who begot him, the one who directs the decrees of Anu Bel and Ea. He was their patron. He ordained he whose provision is abundance goes forth. Tutu Marduk is the one who created them anew. When their needs are pure, they are satisfied. When he performs an incantation, the gods are appeased. When they attack him in anger, he withstands their assault. Therefore let him be exalted, and in the assembly of the gods let him. None among the gods can rival him. Tutu Marduk is Zeukina, the life of the host of the gods, the one who established the bright heavens for the gods. He set them on their way and ordained their path. His deeds shall never be forgotten among mankind. Third, they named Tutu as Zeazag, the bringer of purification, the god of the favoring breeze, the lord of hearing and mercy, the creator of fullness and abundance, the founder of plenty, the one who increases all that is small. In deep distress we felt his favoring breeze. Let them say this. Let them pay reverence. Let them bow in humility before him. Fourth, let mankind magnify Tutu as Agazag, the Lord of the pure incantation, the quickener of the dead, the one who had mercy upon the captive gods, the one who removed the yoke from the gods, his enemies. For their forgiveness he created mankind, the merciful one with whom it is to bestow life. May his deeds endure. May they never be forgotten in the mouth of mankind, whom his hands have made. Fifth, let their mouths proclaim Tutu as Mu'azag, his pure incantation, the one who through his pure incantation destroyed all the evil ones. Sagzu Marduk, the one who knows the heart of the gods, the one who sees through the innermost part. The evildoer he is not allowed to go forth with him. Founder of the assembly of the gods, the one who, their heart. Subduer of the disobedient, director of righteousness, the one who rebellion, and Tutu Azisi, the one who put an end to anger, the one who. Third, Tutu as Sukur, the destroyer of the foe, the one who threw their plans into confusion, the one who destroyed all the wicked. Let them. There is a gap here of 60 lines. Somewhere among the missing lines belong the following fragments. The one who, he named the 4 quarters of the world. He created mankind, and upon him understanding, the mighty one, Agel, the creator of the earth. Zulumu, the giver of counsel and of whatever. Mumu, the creator of Mulil, the heavens. The one who for Giskelet, the one who brought the gods to nothing. The chief of all lords. Supreme is his might. Lugal Durma, the king of the band of the gods, the lord of rulers, the one exalted in a royal dwelling, the one who among the gods is gloriously supreme. Adu Nuna, the counselor of E, who created the gods his fathers, to the path of whose majesty no god can ever attain. In Dulazag let it be made known, pure is his dwelling. Of those without understanding is Luguldul Azaga, supreme is his might. There, in the midst of Tiamat, of the battle. Here follows the better preserved ending, the star that shines in the heavens. May he hold the beginning and the future. May they pay homage to him, saying, he who forced his way through the midst of Tiamat without resting. Let his name be Nibiru, the Caesar of the midst. For the stars of heaven he upheld their paths. He shepherded all the gods like sheep. He conquered Tiamat. He troubled her and ended her life. In the future of mankind. When the days grow old, may this be heard without ceasing. May it hold sway forever. Since he created the realm of heaven and fashioned the firm earth, the Father Bel called his name the Lord of the world. This title which all the spirits of heaven proclaimed he heard, and his spirit rejoiced. And he said, he whose name his fathers have made glorious shall be even as I. His name shall be Ea. He shall control the binding of all my decrees. He shall make known all my commands. By the name 50, the great gods proclaimed his 50 names. They made his path preeminent. Epilogue. Let them be kept in remembrance, and let the first man proclaim them. Let the wise and the understanding consider them together. Let the father repeat them, and teach them to his son. Let them be in the ears of the pastor and the shepherd. Let a man rejoice in Marduk, the Lord of the gods, so that he may cause his land to become fruitful, and so that he himself may prosper. His word stands firm, his command is unaltered. No god has ever annulled the utterance of his mouth. He gazed in his anger, and he did not turn his neck. When he is enraged, no god can withstand his indignation. Wide is his heart, broad is his compassion. The sinner and evildoer in his presence. They received instruction, they spoke before him. Unto, of Marduk, may the gods, may they, his name. They took in Sumerian king list. After kingship had descended from heaven, Eridu became the seat of kingship. In Eridu, Alulim became king. He ruled for 28,800 years. Alalgar ruled for 36,000 years. 2 kings ruled for 64,800 years. Then Eridu fell, and kingship was carried to Bad Tibira. In Bad Tibira, Enmenluana ruled for 43,200 years. Enmen-Gal-Ana ruled for 28,800 years. Dumuzid the shepherd ruled for 36,000 years. 3 kings ruled for 108,000 years. Then Bad Tibira fell, and kingship was carried to Larak. In Larak, En-Sipad-Zid-Ana ruled for 28,800 years. 1 king ruled for 28,800 years. Then Larak fell, and kingship was carried to Sipar. In Sipar, Enmendur-Ana became king. He ruled for 21,000 years. 1 king ruled for 21,000 years. Then Sipar fell, and kingship was carried to Shurapak. In Shurapak, Ubara-Tutu became king. He ruled for 18,600 years. 1 king ruled for 18,600 years. In 5 cities, 8 kings ruled for 241,200 years. Then the flood swept over. After the flood had swept over, and kingship had again descended from heaven, Kish became the seat of kingship. In Kish, Jushur became king. He ruled for 1,200 years. Kula-Sinabel ruled for 960 years. Nangish-Lishma ruled for 670 years. Entara-Ana ruled for 420 years. Babum ruled for 300 years. Puanam ruled for 840 years. Calibum ruled for 960 years. Kalamum ruled for 840 years. Zukakip ruled for 900 years. Atab ruled for 600 years. Mashta ruled for 840 years. Arwiam ruled for 720 years. Etana the shepherd, the one who ascended to heaven and consolidated all foreign lands, became king. He ruled for 1,500 years. Bali son of Etana ruled for 400 years. Enmenuna ruled for 660 years. Melamkish son of Enmenuna ruled for 900 years. Barsal-Nuna son of Enmenuna ruled for 1,200 years. Samug ruled for 140 years. Tizkar ruled for 305 years. Ilku ruled for 900 years. Iltasadam ruled for 1,200 years. Enmen-Barajsi, the one who struck down Elam, became king. He ruled for 900 years. Aga son of Enmen-Barajsi ruled for 625 years. 23 kings ruled for 24,510 years, 3 months and 3½ days. Then Kish fell, and kingship was carried to Ayana. In Ayana, Meshki-Angashir, son of Utu, became king. He ruled for 324 years. He entered the sea and disappeared. Enmerikar, son of Meshki-Angashir, became king. He ruled for 420 years. Lugalbanda the shepherd ruled for 1,200 years. Dumuzid the fisherman, whose city was Quara, ruled for 100 years. Gilgamesh, whose father was a phantom lord of Kulaba, ruled for 126 years. Urnungal, son of Gilgamesh, ruled for 30 years. Udul-Kalama, son of Urnungal, ruled for 15 years. Labasham ruled for 9 years. Enun-Dara'ana ruled for 8 years. Meshi the smith ruled for 36 years. Melamana ruled for 6 years. Lugal-Ki-Gubni-Dudu ruled for 36 years. Erningen ruled for 7 years. Ergiger, son of Erningen, ruled for 6 years. Kuda ruled for 6 years. Arad, son of Kuda, ruled for 1 year. Dumuzid ruled for 21 years. Enun-Tara-Ana ruled for 8 years. Meshi the smith ruled for 36 years. Melamana ruled for 6 years. Lugal-Melam ruled for 6 years. 12 kings ruled for 2,310 years. Then Uruk fell, and kingship was carried to Ur. In Ur-Mesh-Anapada became king. He ruled for 80 years. Meshki-Angnana, son of Meshanapada, ruled for 36 years. Elulu ruled for 25 years. Balulu ruled for 36 years. 4 kings ruled for 177 years. Then Ur fell and kingship was carried to Awan. In Awan, 3 kings ruled for 356 years. Then Awan fell and kingship was carried to Kish. In Kish, Susuda became king. He ruled for 201 years. Dadasig ruled for 81 years. Mamagal ruled for 360 years. Kalbum ruled for 195 years. Tuj ruled for 360 years. Menuna ruled for 180 years. Enbi Ishtar ruled for 290 years. 7 kings ruled for 1,667 years. Then Kish fell, and kingship was carried to Hamazi. In Hamazi, Hadanish became king. He ruled for 360 years. 1 king ruled for 360 years. Then Hamazi fell, and kingship was carried to Uruk. In Uruk, and Shakansha'ana became king. He ruled for 60 years. Lugalur ruled for 120 years. Argandea ruled for 7 years. 3 kings ruled for 187 years. Then Uruk fell, and kingship was carried to Ur. In Ur-Nani became king. He ruled for 120 years. Meski-Agnana ruled for 48 years. 2 kings ruled for 168 years. Then Ur fell, and kingship was carried to Adab. In Adab, Lugal-Ana Mundu became king. He ruled for 90 years. 1 king ruled for 90 years. Then Adab fell, and kingship was carried to Mari. In Mari, Anbu became king. He ruled for 30 years. Anba ruled for 17 years. Bazi ruled for 30 years. Zizi ruled for 20 years. Lima ruled for 30 years. Sharamiter ruled for 9 years. 6 kings ruled for 136 years. Then Mari fell, and kingship was carried to Kish. In Kish, Kubaba, the tavern keeper, she who made firm the foundations of Kish, became king. She ruled for 100 years. Then Kish fell, and kingship was carried to Akshak. In Akshak, Unzi became king. He ruled for 30 years. Undalulu ruled for 6 years. Urur ruled for 6 years. Puzur-Nira ruled for 20 years. Ishuil ruled for 24 years. Shusin ruled for 7 years. 6 kings ruled for 93 years. Then Akshak fell, and kingship was carried to Kish. In Kish, Puzur-Sin became king. He ruled for 25 years. Urzababa ruled for 400 years. Zimudar ruled for 30 years. Usiwata ruled for 7 years. Eshtar-Muti ruled for 11 years. Ishmishamash ruled for 11 years. Shuilishu ruled for 15 years. Nania the jeweler ruled for 7 years. 8 kings ruled for 506 years. Then Kish fell, and kingship was carried to Akkad. In Akkad, Sargon became king. He ruled for 56 years. Ramush, son of Sargon, ruled for 9 years. Manish-Tushu, brother of Remush, ruled for 15 years. Naram-Sin, son of Manish-Tushu, ruled for 36 years. Sharkali-Shari, son of Naram-Sin, ruled for 25 years. Then who was king? Who was not king? Irgigi ruled for 3 years. Imi ruled for 3 years. Nanam ruled for 3 years. Ilulu ruled for 3 years. 4 of them ruled for 12 years. Dudu ruled for 21 years. Shudurul, son of Dudu, ruled for 15 years. 11 kings ruled for 197 years. Then Akkad fell, and kingship was carried to Uruk. In Uruk, Ur-Nigin became king. He ruled for 7 years. Urjigir ruled for 6 years. Kuda ruled for 6 years. Puzur-Ili ruled for 5 years. Ur-Utu ruled for 6 years. 5 kings ruled for 30 years. Then Uruk fell, and kingship was carried to Gutium. In the land of Gutium, at first no king was famous. They ruled themselves for 3 years. Then their kings became known. Inkashush ruled for 6 years. Sarlagab ruled for 6 years. Shulmi ruled for 6 years. Elulmesh ruled for 6 years. Inimabakesh ruled for 5 years. Igashaush ruled for 6 years. Yarlagab ruled for 3 years. Ibat ruled for 3 years. Yarlaganda ruled for 7 years. Shulme-Shar ruled for 6 years. Siu ruled for 7 years. Tirigan ruled for 40 days. 12 kings ruled for 91 years and 40 days. Then Gutium fell, and kingship was carried to Uruk. In Uruk, Utuhengal became king. He ruled for 7 years. Then Uruk fell, and kingship was carried to Ur. In Ur-Namu became king. He ruled for 18 years. Shogi, son of Ur-Namu, ruled for 46 years. Amar-Sin, son of Shogi, ruled for 9 years. Shu-Sin, son of Amar-Sin, ruled for 9 years. Ibi-Sin, son of Shu-Sin, ruled for 24 years. 5 kings ruled for 106 years. Then Ur fell and kingship was carried to Isin. In Isin, Ishbi-Era became king. He ruled for 33 years. Shu-Ilishu ruled for 20 years. Idin-Dogon ruled for 20 years. Ishmi-Dogon ruled for 20 years. Lipit-Ishtar ruled for 11 years. Ur-Ninurta ruled for 28 years. Bur-Sin ruled for 21 years. Lipit-Enlil ruled for 5 years. Era-Imidi ruled for 8 years. Enlil-Bani ruled for 24 years. Zambia ruled for 3 years. Iter-Pisha ruled for 4 years. Urdu-Kuga ruled for 4 years. Suen-Magir ruled for 11 years. Damik-Ilishu ruled for 23 years. 15 kings ruled for 225 years. Thus ends the king list. From the moment kingship descended from heaven to the time of Isin, the line of kings was never broken. Let the echoes of Atrahasis and Enuma Elish settle in your mind. What you have just heard is not a science fiction novel written for entertainment. It is the birth record of humanity. Under the flickering firelight of 4,000 years ago, the Sumerians shaped clay tablets and used sharpened reeds to carve into them a brutal truth about our own origin. If we strip away every layer of modern language, if we set aside the endless arguments between mainstream science and the ancient astronaut theory, then the core of these texts leaves us with a philosophy that is deeply chilling and profound. The Atrahasis Epic says this: human beings are not the peak of natural evolution, nor are we lives created in the loving care of the Creator. We were born as a technical solution, a labor force created to carry the yoke of slavery in place of the lower gods who were rebelling. But the most haunting detail does not lie in the purpose for which we were born. It lies in the material from which we were made. The goddess Mami did not use only lifeless clay to shape humanity. She required the sacrifice of Geshtu-i, a god who carried intelligence and awareness within him. The clay of earth was mixed with the blood and flesh of a god from the sky. That one mythological detail alone fully explains both the tragedy and the greatness of the human condition. It explains why our species is filled with so many contradictions. We carry within us the clay of earth lowliness, wild survival instinct, cruelty, and bottomless greed. But at the same time, flowing through our veins is the blood of Geshtu-i, the spark of divine intelligence. It is that divine blood that has driven human beings to rise from dark caves and build radiant super cities. It makes us look up toward the stars, calculate the orbits of planets, create art, artificial intelligence, and spacecraft that explore the universe. We are imprisoned inside a biological body of Earth, but our minds are always crying out to reach the upper realm of space, the place where the source of our intelligence truly belongs. For thousands of years, humanity has always felt alone. The emptiness of an orphaned species that does not know who its true parents are. That is why we have sent radio signals into the darkest regions of the universe, launched spacecraft carrying golden records in the hope of finding another civilization. We scan the red deserts of Mars, searching for a pyramid-shaped rock. We are haunted by the ancient astronaut theory by Nibiru, by the Anunnaki. Mainstream science may say that this is only psychological illusion, that the Anunnaki are only metaphors created by primitive people standing before the greatness of natural forces, that we are merely frightening ourselves with shadows on the walls of Lascaux Cave. But whether the Anunnaki were an extraterrestrial mining corporation, great founders, or simply the greatest creation of the human imagination, their legacy is still alive. It does not lie beneath the ruins of Iraq. It lies inside us. Just as the epic wrote, "Let the ghost of the slain god exist within humanity so that they may never forget." Every time human beings cross a new boundary of technology, every time we successfully encode a new strand of DNA or launch a space station into orbit, we are not only moving toward the future, we are unconsciously repeating exactly what those who created us once did. We are stepping onto the throne of the gods. The story of the Anunnaki began with their descent from the heavens to earth, and perhaps the final destiny of humanity is to rise from earth carrying the blood of Geshtu-E and return once again to the sky. You are listening to Sleep Codex. If tonight's story has awakened something deep within your subconscious, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, and join us as we continue decoding the hidden languages buried inside the long sleep of history. And now close your eyes. May you have a deep and peaceful sleep. And perhaps in tonight's dream, you may hear the echo of the founders. Goodbye, and we will meet again.